You're next. Okay. We're back in session, and we'll now proceed to the Business Operations Committee, and I'll turn to our Vice Chair, Mr. Duncan, Chair of the BizOp Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Along with Todd Chastain, we lead the Business Operations Committee. We have 2 items for action on first reading. Today, our first one is BizOp 1, which is the Education Workforce Innovation Commission for 6th and 7th grade expansion grant recommendations. And I think we have Trey Michaels and Miss Jacqueline Wyatt here to discuss this. Ms. Wyatt, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Davis, and members of the State Board of Education. My name is Jacqueline Wyatt, and I'm the Career Readiness Specialist for the Career and Technical Education Division here at DPI. I also serve as staff to the Education and Workforce Innovation Commission, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I'm going to give you a little background on. We also call them EWIC. So EWIC is tasked with overseeing 2 grants. Let's see. The first one is the Education and Workforce Innovation Fund, or EWIF. We have lots of acronyms. And the second one is the Career and Technical Education Grade Expansion Grant. So the Grade Expansion Grant was established to expand CTE programs by prioritizing the inclusion of students in the 6th and 7th grades. All right, so the funds were intended to be used to employ additional licensed personnel, such as CTE teachers, career development coordinators, and CTE support service personnel. So before I get too far into it, I wanted to share with you 2 success stories, or 2 interesting stories of how the grants are used throughout the state. So the first one is in Elkin City Schools, and what they did was hire a career development coordinator, or a CDC, which allows for 6th and 7th grade students to benefit from the engagement with business representatives through classroom visits, job shadowing, and mock interviews. And then one that's very different, and also in a slightly different part of the state, would be in Franklin County, where they allow for the employment of an agriculture education teacher who teaches the exploratory courses in agriculture science and biotechnology in agriculture to 6th and 7th grade students. So it's really interesting because they're sort of vast, right? And what they're meant to do, what these funds are meant to do, is increase career awareness for 6th and 7th grade students, and we all know how pivotal those years are for students in North Carolina. So let's see. All right, so some important information for you to know is that fiscal year 2020 marks year 3 of the 7-year grant cycle, and per the legislation, previous applicants shall receive priority in the funding and application process. So we're gonna come back to that in a second. And then the maximum budget for each grantee is $50,000. So these are the grant recipients from 2018-19. All right, so per legislation, the commission shall recommend recipients of the grants to the State Board of Education for approval. So, as I said earlier, if you get the grant last year, you get priority for the grant this year. So these 28 grantees are the same as the recommendation for the 2019-2020 applicants as well. Are there any questions?
All right, questions. Glad Patrick's not here so he could chime in about Greene County. Any questions on these grants, the proposed recommendations? And this completely expends the grant money available and is pursuant to the rubric for the awarding of the grants. So, all right, not hearing any.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. All right, our BizOp number 2 action on first reading item is North Carolina Public School Employee Salary Manual Amendments. Alexis Schaus is here to update us on the recent fascinating amendments that we have to make sure we carefully follow because they are very important.
Why, thank you for that. So back in June, the State Board of Education provided us authority to implement any legislative changes so that we could do that in a timely manner. And this is, needless to say, been an unusual year, but we are now at a point where we have some mini budget bills that have impact public school personnel, and hence the state board policy on salary for public school personnel. So this is the official updating of those policies. You have with you, with your materials, you have 4 attachments. They only include the sections of the manual that have changes. If you go to attachment 4, it does provide a summary for you of the changes that have been made. So just highlighting the changes. All of these, with a couple of exceptions, are explicit from the legislation. And I will point out the ones that are not. But in Section C, we have the principal. These are school building administrator salaries. There was a change for the principal's salary based on the school ranges were modified to increase the ranges by 1 category at the bottom and also increase the top level. There were changes to the principal bonuses for principals that are in the top 10% of the state as measured by the school's EVAS growth scores. Those bonuses were increased quite significantly. And in addition, last year we had the double bonus for principals in a D and F school that was eliminated, so that is stricken. One item that is not explicit in the law that was added to the policy is that if a the legislation requires the principal to be the supervisor for the majority of the school year, and we have a number of instances where a principal is in a school for equally 6 months in one school and 6 months in the other, as they change at December 31st. In that case, the board policy states that the principal, if both schools receive a bonus, they are eligible for the higher of the 2. So that is the proposal, the recommendation there. There is also legislation and an addition for a principal recruitment bonus. This recruitment, the actual supplement, that is $30,000 supplement to a principal paid on the exceeded pay level if they work in one of the bottom 40 low-performing schools as selected by the Department of Public Instruction. The pay actually becomes effective in July 1, 2020, but there is requirements of the school district to elect and various things in this school year for that recruitment to take place, for the salary to be effective next year. Moving to the teacher section, Section D, there is updated for state board policy numbers when those were changed, there are changes for that. The veteran teacher bonus from 2018-19 has been deleted. That was in the vetoed House Bill 966, but is not effective at this point. There was clarifying language for the highly qualified teacher supplement, and then minor technical changes just to related to session law. There is the biggest difference in this section is the addition for reemployed retirees exempt from the cap, and that is in K of that Section D. This was new session law that that allows teachers to be reemployed in a DLF school or a Title I school without affecting their earnings retirement, and the law actually stipulates the amount of their salary that they can receive and some other items. In Section F, the benefits for the current year as they stand right now was modified, as well as we struck out the language that allowed employees who elected to receive their pay, their 10-month pay over 12 months. The recommendation is to strike out the ability for them to discontinue that election during the school year. The reason for this is that the installment plan actually comes under the non-qualified deferred compensation, which is an irrevocable election under IRS rules, and they may be subject to a penalty if they do come off those installments during those years. So we wanted to be sure that that would not be the case. It would actually could be up to a 20% penalty. So that in Section F was deleted. Those are the changes as of now. Of course, there may be additional changes in the second half of the year depending on the actions, if any, of the General Assembly.
Thank you. Alexis, are there questions or comments on these changes and modifications? Not seeing any. Let me say thank you to you, Ms. Schaus, and your staff. It's been a complicated year from your standpoint to work through these things, and so we're particularly appreciative of the time and care that was required to do it, and thank you for the excellent job that you're doing. And as you said, you may not be done. We'll see how that progresses, but thank you for the work that's been done.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Our next item is BizOp 3, which is an action item, but it's been withdrawn for now. This is a very complicated policy that's being worked on, and there's a number of issues as we've continued to work on it. There's a number of issues that have continued to crop up in terms of how to handle this aspect or that aspect, and so it's still being worked on. Good progress is being made, but it's a difficult issue to deal with. And just as a quick update on what's involved, it involves supporting the local districts in terms of stabilization funds primarily is the most difficult issue, as they're making the switch over the course of the next few years to the new state modernized business system operations. And so there are a number of issues that deal not just with the new vendors who are coming in, but with prior vendors who obviously service some of our districts, and the working through a transition that's not that is as seamless as possible within the constraints of a policy that makes sense from a financial standpoint for the board. So that's the work that's being done. It's very important work, and I do want to communicate that, and I've been asked to communicate that to the districts, that it is very important work, and we realize that, but at the same time, it's not yet ready, and we hope to be able to bring it in January and work out the various wrinkles that are still there to be worked through. And thank you to those who are working on it. Our next item is a discussion item, BizOp 4, and this is a very important item, I think, which is the State Board of Education prioritized budget requests. And I want to give thanks to JB, who had put together a listing for his the committees in which he's involved, and got so excited about it, he had written down notes about other committee comments or discussions that we've had. So he wrote a pretty thorough document that he shared with everybody, and I personally want to thank him for doing that, because it's helpful to have it out here. I know committee chairs may have other items they want to add on to this, but what I think we'd like to do today is, we're not obviously forming or finalizing our budget today. That's work we will do in January, but we had committed to work through the committees to come up with the items that we need to talk about and think about, and begin a process of prioritizing should that be necessary. And given the needs, the likelihood is prioritizing at some point may become necessary. So I thought we'd go around people who are participating on various committees, if you would make comments in terms of the things, if there are additional things we should be adding to this list that we have, and there may well be. And to the extent that you have in mind some prioritizations, even with things that are on the list, that's valuable information, and we can then further compile and refine this list, if you will, as we get ready for the January budget work. So that's the discussion and help that we would love to get as we take a look at what we've got before us. And with that, open the floor and I guess dare somebody to go first. I don't really dare. I invite somebody to go first.
Back to the document, is it before us?
Distributed, yeah. JB, why don't you go first, and that'll give others an opportunity to think about where they're headed. particularly starting with the early grades reading would probably be a good place to start.
Mr. Chairman, we talked in our committee, SLA committee, if you look at the document in front of you, the 6 items that are on there that relate to early grades reading, which derive directly from the framework for action that we passed as a board last spring. We'll talk a little bit more about that later during the SLA committee. But we talked about these items for SLA. Other items on here come from conversations we've had at the table, our planning and work session, and are, as you can see in the parenthetical statements, aligned with some goal or objective, or multiple goals and objectives in our strategic plan. And so these are intended to reflect conversations I thought we had, priorities I thought we had raised, most of which are in the K-12 budget, some of which I'd suggest we support in some way as an accessory statement or auxiliary statement that would be in the community college or UNC or DHHS budgets, but directly impact our work with the public schools. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. I should say this, they were not intended to be instead of what's on pages, I think, 4, 5, and 6. I didn't try to fold those in. So what came from the department is a standalone, and I saw as mostly supporting agency needs. And these were additional, some of them are agency needs, some of them are state public school fund needs, some of them are new initiatives that relate to our strategic plan, and then there are some salary and other related items. And the last thing I would say is there are a couple special provisions that I think we would be asking for as well to support priorities we've been discussing.
So, and that's a good point. This is reflective of strategic planning objectives that we spent a lot of time on in the last year. It's also, I think, reflective on the structure that we created for improvement in reading and turnaround schools, both of which you and Ms. White have spent a lot of time on in the last year. And I think the board has recognized as a very pressing priority for the students in North Carolina. And so those are objectives I think the board has discussed often, and with a great deal of unanimity and thought process about how to go after those. So I do appreciate your compiling those items. Other areas that we want to talk about, or those areas if we want to talk about. Mr. McKinney, you look anxious to say something.
I'm just making sure that this is the time that if we felt like there were areas that we want to discuss adding something on, is this
Yes.
the appropriate time?
Yes, it is.
So underneath teacher preparation, professional development, and pay, I would like to enter a consideration to look at the possibility of teacher cadet program models to develop that at the education profession at the high school level, and also to look at national models for diversification of the workforce. Particularly, Call Me Mister, which is a South Carolina model. I think kind of looking at some models there to help with that, with those two underneath that, would be beneficial.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other thoughts under teacher preparation, professional development, and pay? And we've spent a lot of time talking about teacher preparation as early as this morning. Mr. Ford.
So my apologies for not being present earlier this morning. This has already been covered, but a couple of items that I think may be worthwhile in the spirit of capturing our priority within the state plan to diversify the profession and recruit educators of color is something as simple as a marketing campaign from the state level of some sort. I couldn't help but my interest be piqued when looking at sort of the digital ambassadors, that sort of program where folks are kind of out and actively recruiting, and there's visual, there's a marketing, something that indicates a tangible presence in our pursuit to diversify, so that folks of color who are thinking about going into the profession could perhaps be appealed to, something simple that way. And then just flat out, I see here number 10, funding for development and procurement of culturally relevant curriculum and other materials. In addition to that, the actual professional development itself. So opportunities, monies for teachers to receive PDs that are specifically focused on how to teach diverse learners, students with diverse needs, I think would be important as well to couple with those materials.
Very good, thank you. One of the things we did talk about this morning that is encompassed on item number 9 was either reorganizing personnel or providing personnel support for the EPPs. And I think that's intended to be encompassed, and I think that was a topic that was discussed this morning. I did want to highlight that just because we spent some time on it today.
I would
Yes,
also
Ms.
point
Candace.
out along those lines that there is in the back 3 pages, a request from Dr. Hemphill for computer science professional development funding, so that also relates to what we just heard.
Yes, and if there are other personnel needs that were not lifted up here or talked about, then please feel free to raise those as well. If they're not raised in the department or they're not, but they're things that you have observed that there may be a need to be considered, then we certainly ought to have that on the table as a thought process at least.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
a question. It's page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's under the biennium request for the 2019 long session. I note Dr. Petrie Martin is the director, so I have, I think, some memory of her raising these issues, but just any detail from the department on what the it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th item and the 9th item. We've got $1,050,000 and $9 million for personalized learning and standards, $5.6 million for digital literacy, personalized learning. I understand the $2.4 million digital learning funds and the $1 million in local grants. Just remind us what that would provide.
I don't know if anyone's here prepared to respond to that today, but we will. Yeah, well, I'm saying we will come back and talk about that in January. The issues are being raised, so we can discuss in January. So we will get,
Last month. Yeah, it was on last month's. This was a request from last year too, and I'm just trying to remember what that provides.
well, we'll get responsive information on that in terms of what that provides for.
Thank you.
And to be fair, the focus here is what we have coming out of our committees, because we're gonna need to revisit this entire document carefully in January, not just those items. But I appreciate any highlighting of items ahead of time, and I know staff will as well, to be able to take a look at it in the head and be ready to address issues.
Mr. Oaken, so,
Yes, Ms. White.
Is it okay if we move to school and district assistance and turnaround?
Yes.
That's on page 2. So, Mr. Buxton eloquently positioned our thoughts on what's needed to assist in our efforts for school turnaround. Just highlighting 18 and 19 would be I would put the category down as flex funding. That allows us to manipulate positions where there's the area of highest need, and that might mean using some of our ISD positions. It might mean working with our regional support system, where we have many schools within one district that have a high degree of support, and maybe another district that doesn't have any low-performing schools. Allowing us to use those funds at our discretion would be one of our top priorities. And then the idea of an external partner that the district does what it does, in the best of its ability, but we might be able to leverage, even, and this is being done nationwide. I'm using external qualified, external partners to come in to help with school turnaround, and, that idea of qualified, what that means is, many different people define it many different ways, but a qualified external contractor might be a benefit. So again, kudos to Mr. Buxton for sort of getting that to paper. For us. And then out of our committee, I just want to remind board members that we heard that, budget requests typically, well, as succinctly as we can say, we're already looking at a very long list that will end up being a very short list when it comes down to putting, dollars to programs. And so, we need to be very careful about how we use, I think it's 2%, is that right, Ms. Shells, or, Ms. Johnson? Yes, 2%.
That's typical, but we don't have the guidance yet.
Yes, ma'am. So, we can generate a long list, but it's gonna be a short list.
Yes, Ms. Johnson, do you wanna?
Thank you. We have just gotten an update from OSBM that they expect to have that guidance to us by December 16th. And so they have also graciously allowed us to have a little bit more time for you all to have our deadline be February 7th instead of January.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And I think the moral of your story is that the prioritization process is gonna be very important. And so as we're having this discussion, if you want to pitch your priorities, I think it's important that you go ahead and do that to the group, because as a group, we're gonna have to decide on priorities, and so it wouldn't be too early to do a little pitching if that's what you feel is important. I think we have a pretty good idea in terms of where we are, but I think that's always easy to say in the abstract and a lot harder to get to a final place on sometimes. So that's what we need to start working on that. Anything else on school and district assistance and turnaround that comes to mind? Early learning, I would note on this one, this is phrased in terms of actually resolutions this board's passed, which is to support early learning. You'll recall Secretary Cohen made a presentation to the board and passed a resolution to support the early learning initiatives and the early learning development document that was worked through by our department earlier this year after Early Learning Summit. So these are items that are less directly that we would be pushing or from our budget, but rather a commitment that we would support these items from a DHHS budgetary standpoint. So, yes.
Mr. Duncan, I just wanted to comment on item number 20. I know that all of the advisors to the board, the teachers of the year and principals of the year, and I know Pat Miller from Greene County, superintendent of the year, are all in complete consensus and are universal and unequivocal support for item number 20. And if there's anything that we can do as a collective voice to throw our support behind that, we see crystal clear the trickle-up benefits of a robust North Carolina preschool, pre-K program, particularly with eliminating opportunity gaps starting in kindergarten. So that's something that we care deeply about and would like to have a consensus voice in just supporting that.
And I think it's fair to say we already are a consensus voice. In fact, I believe we were a unanimous voice on this issue, so that was very supportive of this, and appreciate you crystallizing why it's so important for us, Mr. Bristow Smith. All right, connecting high school to post-secondary and career opportunities, which is something we have spent more time with this year than we have perhaps in the past. It's an increasingly important area, and as we look at some of the initiatives going forward, like My Future NC and others, just how we tie to that and how we tie to economic development issues that are very prevalent going around our state. I know a lot of people around this table are involved in those, and so really interested in input we may have on this. We've got several items listed, but if there, we want to consider others as we may need to.
I'll highlight number 23, which says funding for expected new cooperative innovative high schools. And just bring to the board's attention that we're getting ready to have a presentation by Ms. Sneha Shah Coltrane for a fabulous opportunity for a new cooperative innovative high school, and we need that funding in order to put those programs in place. So she'll share more about that. You're welcome.
All right,
Gaston County, it's gonna be fabulous.
Really cool.
and I think we spent a fair amount of time on CTE initiatives, and 24's focused on that. Mr. Wiles, would you like to?
I was just about to definitely say, I wanted to highlight 24 for the funding and consulting. Pretty much bringing together those career pathways and CTE, concentrated courses, based on workforce demands. A lot of that's already being done with career academies and this and that across the state. But being that that's a focus now, and it's in this plan, I definitely wanted to highlight that because if we look at the research, for the next 10 years, all the jobs that's coming out, that are projected to come out, are really gonna require those industry certifications or 2-year degrees. So we're kind of going back from the 4-year degrees. So this is definitely great timing for this to be highlighted.
Dr. Tipton Rogers, I know you're new to the board, but I know you're also very involved in this kind of work. Didn't know if you might want to add a couple insights or thoughts to that.
I agree with everything that everyone said. Of course, this is the first time I've seen it, but this is something that's very near and dear to community college. That partnership and collaboration, so that's what I would like to say.
Very good. All right, our next area is supporting the whole child, which has been an important board initiative for several years now. As you will recall, the funding for school support positions, it was calculated as we're in approximately $720 million deficit when compared to national averages, and we had requested on the expansion budget last year a 10% effort at starting to make some gains on that, and ultimately we recommended $70 million. That needle has been moved, not to the extent of $70 million, considerably less than that over the course of this budgetary year. So we're probably still at least $700 million behind or more. And so I pause on that item just to see if there's what thoughts we may have about that. It's something we've heard a lot about in terms of the health of the whole child. It's something I think every one of us believes in, and I think every one of us recognizes the challenges of children are increasingly difficult in many of the environments that they find themselves in. And so this is something we need to be very sensitive to, how we support these children so that they can learn and become the productive citizens we know they can be. So I lift that up because that's a huge item. Yes, sir, Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this will add to the deficit or not, but is it anywhere in here, it could be embedded somewhere, ACEs. The ACEs concept with that whole child and adverse childhood experiences. Is anywhere in here that talks about that at all?
I think this probably comes the closest to being embedded of anything that we have, that is to address the issues. Obviously, the funding to support some of these other programs, 24, it very, very indirectly, again, touches upon that, but we don't have an item directly on it, so.
I was wondering if we could even have a pilot program with it. It's just something that, we talk about that whole child, that we're, I feel that we're leaving out if it's not addressed. I thought I saw it in an original, maybe draft budget or something about some pilot at $250,000 or something like that. I was reading one time. But I haven't seen anything else about it. In lieu of as you remember, in November, they talked about it in one of the presentations, how important it was.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, there is the work going on in Edgecombe with
Public School Forum's Trauma Sensitive Schools Program.
trauma sensitive schools, Seth and,
Beachy.
right, they've been looking at expanding some other
The
districts.
Rural Opportunity Institute, and they are doing cutting-edge work with biofeedback and how that connects with social emotional learning and adverse childhood experiences. And they are expanding not just within the school system, but it's also within the prison system, doing truly innovative work that's not being done at that level and to that degree anywhere else in the country. And they are doing that at Edgecombe, largely supported with the Public School Forum and other grants that ROI has done. It's great work. And
Might be worth learning a little bit.
Halifax, I'd love for you to come to
No,
Edgecombe.
no, I'm not in Halifax, I'm in Hertford.
You're in Hertford. Come visit.
I will,
Come
thank
visit,
you.
and I'll take you over there to Patella Middle School.
Well, Mr. Hall, you may have been referring to the social and emotional learning pilot in kindergarten, which is a $250,000 item in the department's proposed budget. Yeah, I think that's what you're thinking of.
But there's also a program that goes along with that, Kendra. If I know the program called Miss Kendra, which,
yeah.
addresses
Yeah.
that let's see. I was just thinking, you know, so many kids, as you said originally, going to environments, not environments that, until we address that, we're losing a lot, especially, that child who has, all kids have potential, but there are others that just a little bit of helping. If you've never seen Kendra, Miss Kendra, program, it's something worth looking into.
Very good. Very
I've
help-
seen kids react to it, and kids even help one another to relieve the shame of coming out of a home that where you were molested that night before by kinfolk. So any kind of way, I'm gonna put that out for some money or something like that, but I would certainly, you say it's in Edgecombe? I would certainly.
We have a school that's doing really great work with ACEs,
Good.
and the Rural Opportunity Institute is actually based in a middle school in our district, space, and they do work across a variety of different platforms, and it's innovative, and with proper funding, as you say, I think it could be scalable.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
It might be helpful if we got a presentation about
Hey, that's a great idea.
that. I think there would be real board interest in hearing greater detail about that, so it may be something we want to follow up on.
Will we also add Kendra to that list?
It's added.
Is that?
It's been taking notes as we go along, as I know others have been as well, but it's added. Then the last item is increasing NCDPI support positions. And there's 3 areas that are specified here, but there may be other thoughts, and I don't wanna cut off that thought process, but let me just briefly hit on the ones we have. In audit and finance, our folks are really working hard, and there are some vacancies, and there's probably some broader issues about whether we try to find ways to reclassify positions, or if we can find a way for greater flexibility in hiring, so that we can get those type of very talented people in that we want to get in these positions. Difficult issues, but they're not all financial. Some of it's financial, but some of it is, how can we best fit the square peg into the round hole? We got some work to do on that, but we have real needs, and it's an important area for us to be able to say that we feel comfortable with fulfilling those needs. The formal rulemaking process, I will not allow Eric Snyder to speak, but if our legal counsel was allowed to speak, we would be here for a long time, and he would be very eloquent on the needs and how difficult this process is, and how extraordinarily time-consuming this process is, and complicated and complex. And so there are real needs here that are important to try to address. And Eric, I was only sort of kidding. If you would like to say anything to that, you feel free to do so.
In the interest of brevity, I think there are just two really important pieces, I think, for the board to hear on this. The rulemaking enterprise that the department and the board are tasked with really are, it really is a very unique process in that we have these existing policies that we're trying to move into the administrative code, and with K-12 being a particularly highly regulated environment with new initiatives coming over from the General Assembly, oftentimes on very, very tight, some might even say unreasonably tight timelines, being able to be nimble and actually meet those expectations is difficult with the infrastructure that we're working to rebuild now. In particular, there is a great need to bring in expertise to write fiscal notes, to support the rulemaking work that we're doing. The department has offered some assistance recently, which will be very helpful. But the board's policymaking work is going to involve rules from now on. The Supreme Court's made that clear, and making the right investments and the right talent will be of great benefit, not just to the department, but importantly to all of our stakeholders, including EPPs, school districts, licensed professionals. So I think it's a very important investment for the department and the board to consider.
Thank you. You took your opportunity to pitch and swung hard. That's very helpful. Yes, Chair Davis.
Mr. Duncan, I would just add to Mr. Snyder's comments that this need is not just staff to support the board. As we heard this morning from Dr. Tomberlin, his team needs support in order to do the work of the agency. And I suspect it's not just his team, it's others. So this is an agency-wide board and DPI need. It's not a one-time need. It's going to be an ongoing requirement.
Yes. So I will also point out 27, I think, is something that we need to see where we can potentially go. There are some changes going on, I think, in that process. We need to follow those changes, but we need to make sure we've got in place the type of protections that we want to have there. And I'm going to follow up on Chair Davis's comment and say this, that we've highlighted some areas where we know of personnel needs, and we've become, as a board, become acquainted as we've tried to work through some issues that are being faced. There are other likely positional needs that you may be acquainted with through your committee work. It's important that you bring those to us. If there's things that we haven't talked about or covered yet and that you're aware of through your committee work. And just as importantly, if our staff has needs, that to please talk through the committees with the liaisons to help bring those needs to our attention. That we cannot make promises honestly on any of these items, but on the other hand, we can be a unified force in order to try to move forward with the importance of these items and with the needs that could be addressed by proper use or allocation of funding for many of these items. So I do think this is a great place for department and committees to collaborate with one another. Other items, we've sort of gone through it now by categories. Are there other items to be added to categories or other categories? All right, well, we will reconfigure this list. We will distribute it in plenty of time before the January meeting. We now, I think, have clearance that we're going to go till February before we finalize the budget. But I think we should be prepared to discuss in pretty good detail in January, so as we prepare for the budget and get ready to go forward what our requests are going to be. So I'd ask everybody to keep this top of mind, particularly for the next couple of months until we get to a place. And there's some things that could happen, as you know. We still have some balls in the air about budgetary items, and so we're just going to have to wait to see how those play out as well. So thank you for your patience through this. This is not the most fascinating discussion we'll have today, but it's nonetheless is extraordinarily important if we're going to move the ball on some of these very, very important items that we do discuss and the needs that we know so clearly that exist. Also want to thank our staff for the work they've done in trying to put together assessment of where needs are and for the points that they've put forward to have for consideration. We have, next item is requested update on the monthly agency vacancy report. Anyone have any questions? Haven't had the opportunity to review the monthly report. Not seeing any. We also had the monthly update on executed contracts report and the planned contracts report. Any questions anyone had on either of those two reports for this month? All right, not seeing any, then that brings us to our last item, which is a consent agenda item, which I think is Biz Op 5, which is approval of chief financial officers in local districts. That would be a consent agenda item. We've had a lot of those during the course of the year, although I think we'd had a 2 or 3 month break, but we're now back with approval of a couple of those requests as a consent agenda item. And that concludes our report, Chair. Thank you, Chair Davis. Thank you for everyone's patience.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Before we move to the next committee, I'd like to welcome a member of our General Assembly, Representative Charles Graham. Thank you so much, sir, for being present today and for your advocacy and support for our public school students. Thank you very much, sir. We'll now proceed to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee, and I'll turn to Ms. White, Chairman of that committee.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amy White, and I am the Chair of the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee, and I, along with Ms. Jo Kamnitz, are here today with several items for discussion. The first item is an action on first read, and it is the 2018-2019 North Carolina Virtual Public School Annual Report, and I do believe that Liz Colbert is going to come and walk us through this presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. I am Liz Colbert. Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here to talk about the 2018-2019 school year. And this is a report we do annually that is due to you by December 15th. So this year I have the pleasure of sharing this opportunity with one of your advisors. Nate Kolk-Tomberlin is your advisor, and he is also a veteran NCVPS student. He's taken 3 Latin classes online with us, so he's going to share his experience. But before we get into 2018-19, I do want to close the loop on one issue that plagued us this year at the beginning of 19-20 school year. And that is you may remember we were subjected to a reinterpretation of the law around contract temporary employees and the mandatory 31-day separation. And I am pleased to say we have a solution to that going forward beginning in June. We have been able to arrange our calendar, our school calendar, in order to accommodate that. And we will be running 2 tracks, much like a year-round school does, in order to accommodate the variety that is in school calendars now. And also to do this, we started with a focus group of staff and teachers and then moved to our advisory council. And as you know, they are state leaders across the state, you know, at various levels of education, and they provided us a lot of good feedback and input. And then before we declared it done, we did ask every single teacher, all 700 of them, for their input and feedback. And overall, the general feedback is positive. So people are feeling good about how this has worked out. So we will begin this in June of 2019. So I know that's not what our report is about, but that is a burning issue that I wanted to close the loop on. So thank you for that opportunity. Okay. Okay, do you have the PDF? On the e-board is a PDF, and what we tried to do was cram one school year into 2 pages, if we could. One school year for 51,000 students into 1 page to just give you some highlights and a sneak peek at future work, and then some ongoing challenges that we face. Some highlights are we continue to serve 115 of the school districts in the state. We do not serve the ISD yet, but those students are too young for the services we have. But the diversity in the kinds of schools that we are serving is growing. Our charter school enrollment numbers are up. The homeschool and private school population numbers are up. So that's interesting, and that's exciting to me, because I always believe the virtual classroom is so flexible, we should be able to use it to meet a variety of learning needs. We also offer free, good word, professional development for teachers across the state. Most of it is self-paced. And you'll see from the PDF 19,000 different teacher enrollments in those classes during the 18-19 school year. They do lead to CEUs on topics of interest. So we believe that is a free service we can offer the state. I'm excited to say we're finally going to have, this time next year, I'll be able to tell you about ASL, American Sign Language 1 and 2. That has been a request from the field for a while. And middle school core, we're starting with 8th grade. We have middle school electives. We have those already, but we're getting into the core, so that's exciting. And then our challenges really are resource-based. You know, if we had more money, different things that we could do. So that's a high-level synopsis. And now at the top, you'll see it. That's a hyperlink that will lead you to the report. And I must give all the credit to Dr. Mia Murphy, our Chief of Operations, who put our annual report from a paper copy into Tableau, so it is not a book for your coffee table. It's not a dust collector. It's a searchable tool. And so I just want to show you real quickly, some of you are used to this. This is, I think, the 3rd year we've done this. But this is the highlight page. And then if you go to the scorecard tab, it's the 3rd one in. This is where you can start searching. It defaults to the state view. The highest enrollers, the most popular courses continue to be the occupational course of study pathway courses for the state, the number of students who enroll in certain courses, and the different courses by level, advanced placement, credit recovery, etc. But you can search it. And I just think that's important, because you may be interested in a certain district, your certain region, or maybe you want to see the west side of the state versus the east side of the state. But you can use that drop down that Mia is showing you and unclick all. And then if you pick a district, like Bladen County, looks good, you can see just Bladen County. But if you want to pick Bladen and Robeson and Cumberland, you could do that too to get an idea for the area. So I just want to point that out. That's also true of the far, far right tab, talks about the money. And I know that lots of people may ask you questions about the money. We have a legislative funding formula, but what is the dollar amount? What is the impact to the districts? And that's calculated with our colleagues here at DPI on an annual basis based on enrollment and projections. So the heart of the matter is, though, how are the students doing? So, Mia, if you would, it's having a good time dancing all around. So this is academic achievement. We're required to report that. On the right side, you'll see our advanced placement enrollment map, and my friends from the College Board are here. I'm so glad to have them here and see this map. We continue to enroll students across the state in advanced placement who wouldn't have that opportunity any other way. And that map, you can scroll over. It'll give you the specifics by county of the enrollments in the AP classes. On the left, or my left, is the achievement. We do break out the student scores based in these categories because they are by program. So our generals and honors students are doing as well as the state, if not better in some places. The credit recovery program, you will see we had less than 10 students in those areas on credit recovery take the test. Credit recovery we no longer offer. Our district advisors were not interested. Our credit recovery model was teacher-led, and that has become less and less popular for for credit recovery. So more districts are interested in adaptive learning or machine learning for credit recovery. So our numbers plummeted there. So next year we won't have any numbers there. Then we have two programs that are co-teaching. The bottom is occupational course of study. That's our largest program. And you will see we share those students with the district in which they're in. They're with us part-time. I mean, they're with us all the time and their local teacher part of the time. We share the results. And so you will see for that group, the test is hard. Now, the place we have work to do is the co-teaching model just above that. That's the program. You may remember Dr. Taylor came from Blaine County a few years ago and talked about how his students are growing as a result of the co-teaching program. We're not seeing the results in terms of proficiency that we want, to be totally honest. But the district leaders are telling us they are seeing the growth in the students. So that program is growing. We have it for biology, Math 1, and English 2, the 3 EOC courses. And it's targeted at those students who may pass or may not pass. Students who need extra intervention. They have their face-to-face Math 1 teacher, for example, and they also have our online Math 1 teacher to provide acceleration, remediation, tutoring, reteaching, whatever the students need. So it's really personalized learning for those students the district deems for the co-teaching model. So now we have STAR students. We added that this year. People always want to know who are our students, what do they look like, etc. But instead of me talking about it, I thought it would be better if Nate talked about it. So these are some of the students. We get permission to highlight them and tell their stories. But I'm going to turn the floor over to Nate Colt-Tomberlin, your advisor, and he's going to tell you his view of online learning.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm speaking to you today as a former NCVPS student. I took 3 NCVPS classes during my freshman and sophomore years of high school, and I wish to share my opinion on the program with you all. First off, a misconception often made about NCVPS classes is that it's like being taught by a robot, and the student-teacher relationship is lost. I can assure you that while I do believe face-to-face teaching plays a very important role in a student's learning, I had a great connection with my Latin teacher. I often communicated with her through text, and I was able to ask her questions almost any time. NCVPS also offered live class sessions where my teacher, or other Latin teachers, reviewed the lesson with the students and took questions as they went along. These live classes were also recorded and available as a video if I missed the session. The main thing I feel NCVPS provides students is flexibility and availability. Latin was not offered at my school, but I was able to take it through NCVPS. I feel that this program fills a great role by providing students with a wide variety of classes that may not be offered at their school. This may be especially important in instances of underfunded schools where they would lack the resources to provide students with classes they would wish to take. The flexibility aspect of this program is also a huge bonus, as it provides students with a week-to-week deadline for assignments rather than daily homework. Myself and many other students have experienced the frustration of having way too much homework to do on one night, but with the deadline for all work due at the end of the week, students can complete their assignments when the time is best for them. All these things being said, however, I am not an advocate for all of the students' classes to be taken through NCVPS. While I recognize some students have extraordinary circumstances that require them to take all their courses online, for students without these extreme situations, I do not believe taking all online courses is the preferred option. My reasoning for this is that I believe a strong student-teacher relationship can be a great aid in a student's educational experience, and while the NCVPS model does a great job of emulating that, virtual classrooms cannot fully replicate the face-to-face experience. Myself, I have had a handful of teachers in my lifetime that have greatly impacted my education, and I would want every other student to have those same experiences. Thank you. I'm open to any questions you
Now,
guys have.
Nate said he'd take your questions.
Yeah, take any questions.
What do you really want to know about NCVPS?
Mr. Buxton?
I mean, his dad always gets killed up here, so we need to ask him.
him.
We need to ask him some tough questions. Like, we need you to conjugate some Latin verbs. Give us a no. I'm actually really interested in your point about. First, by the way, thanks for standing up here and doing this. I'm really interested in your point about courses that you thought were really helpful to be taken with this medium, and those in which you're not so sure. And just let's stay on the positive side, the ones that you think are most applicable to this kind of learning modality, or however you describe it.
Well, I think that's going to be more of a subjective thing. For me personally, I always did well in English and history, so Like when I took Latin because I wanted to, you know, help me understand English better for like the SAT. So that was something that I didn't have that much trouble with learning online. But for me, for math or physics, which I'm in now, I really benefit from having a teacher that has a really, really good understanding and can explain it to me rather than just reading, you know, how to do the problem. I can't learn that way. I need to be able to see it and work it out in my brain. So for me, math or physics or anything like that is not a great class for me to take on NCVPS, but an English or a history, I think, you know, I would do fine in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, anybody?
You might have some more.
Any questions?
I didn't want to get him off the hot spot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us on your experience. We appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you. And we're excited for another exciting school year, so we'll be back next year to tell you all the good news.
So questions for Dr. Colbert about the report on North Carolina Virtual School?
Remember, it's not for your coffee table. It's for you to search and use as a tool. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chastain?
Dr. Colbert, I'm just going to ask you, is the policy pretty clear throughout the state whether someone who's enrolled in the North Carolina virtual program, whether they can like take part in marching band, theater, soccer team within their LEA, with their place of residence?
Most, so that's a local decision. So from what I know about the virtual academies that are cropping up all over the state and in a lot of the districts is that most of the districts do allow that. They can enroll for a few classes online and then participate in football, for example. Now, there are some schools that do not allow that. For example, Crossroads Flex right here in Raleigh, if you're enrolled at Crossroads Flex, it's not possible for you to be in the marching band at Cary High School or play on the basketball team. So it's a local decision, but in general, it is possible.
So when you say local, is that the superintendent, the principal?
Or the board, the local board.
The local school board? Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Excellent, good question. Mr. Wallace?
Just wanted to say that, thank you for what you do. We could not, as principals, we just commiserated right then, and there's no way that we could have high school as you see it today without NCVPS.
Oh, I
There's no
appreciate
way
it.
we can
Thank you.
diversify the academic load that each individual child, as we said, this board, each and every, in order to serve each and every, and to give those prescribed schedules to make sure it fits what they need to do, especially with Career and College Promise. We don't control when the college instructor is gonna be on campus, and that helps us alleviate, make sure all our kids get exactly what they need, so we appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Seeing no other nod for further comments, Dr. Colbert, thank you for your time and for your staff efforts in putting this report together. And again, love that, we've said it before, we love that dashboard and accessibility to the data that it provides. And we look forward to another positive report next year.
Thank you. And that is Dr. Murphy's creative energy.
Thank you,
I
Dr.
can't take
Murphy.
credit for that.
Let's move then, colleagues, to EICS 2, and this is our recommendations for our 2019 Accelerated Charter School application. And before us today will be Mr. Dave Machado presenting. Mr. Machado.
Thank you, Ms. White. State Board members. At your last meeting, Alex Quigley, Chairman of the Charter School Advisory Board, went over 2 accelerated applications for your consideration. And let me reiterate what an accelerated application is. That is an application that we looked at that was submitted this year, and they want to open next August. It's traditional sequences. They get approved, and they go through one planning year, then they open up the following year. So we had 5 accelerated applications. 2 were approved. Davis Academy in Chadbourne, which is in Columbus County. And there wasn't much discussion on that application. I'm happy to go over any of the statistics of that application or answer any questions at that time. And then there was one application, Old Main Stream, that this board asked to go back to CSAB for further discussion, and they have come back with a unanimous decision not to recommend that application. So I'll be happy to answer questions on either one of those at this time.
Board members, questions about the recommendation for Davis Academy in Chadburn, North Carolina. It's the Columbus County School for an accelerated application acceptance, or any other school that you might want to discuss at this time. Okay. Hearing none, we will move to discussion on EICS 3.
Can I stop and ask one procedural?
Sure.
The procedural question.
Mr. Duncan.
Sorry, I apologize. If it's not recommended, is it still subject to being voted on?
The recommendation from CSAB that is before us is that we accept Davis Academy in Chadburn, North Carolina for accelerated application, which means they would be ready to open next August. The traditional applicants, every other, and there's another long list of applications that will before us. It's a 2-year process. They come for one and open the next calendar year. So, yes, and to answer your question, tomorrow's recommendation will be that we approve Davis Academy's request for fast track.
Just want to make sure I understood the process.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Machado. Discussion item EICS 3, as I mentioned just earlier, Ms. Sneha Shah Coltrane is going to talk to us about our opportunity for a new cooperative innovative high school in Gaston County. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I always appreciate call-outs like that. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Sneha Shah Coltrane. Nice to meet our new board members. Thank you for being here, and of course to see everybody else. Bring to you one of the best times of the year that I get to bring forward to you a new cooperative innovative high school. This year we had one applicant, which we would expect fewer applicants as we've almost saturated the state with our cooperative innovative high schools. We have a map on your presentation. We're still pulling it up here, but you do have that on eBoard. There's a map of all of our schools for cooperative innovative high schools, and this year we currently have open 133 of these schools. These schools are called cooperative innovative high schools. Many people call them early colleges. They have all sorts of names in the field, but technically this is the legislative name. And just as a reminder, and especially for our new members, this process is a very rigorous process, and that is a very lengthy process for a school to be approved and to be able to open. It begins with a letter of intent to us with a partner IHE. So it's an LEA with an IHE, whether it be a community college, whether it be a university, independent, or with our UNC system. Then the applicants come on in, and we provide them significant feedback to ensure they are really focused on the intent of the schools to serve the populations they're intended, and to ensure that there's a lot of significant collaboration, significant partnership, and meaningful planning based on their regional economic needs as well. All that's in the legislation. The applications then actually come to a joint advisory committee, which is actually in law. It's represented from the community college system, represented from the UNC system, and private and independent colleges, and then our DPI representative, and I'm your representative with that committee. And all 4 agencies look at the application and then determine whether or not to actually recommend or not recommend approval to each of the boards, associated boards. So it'll be to you today, depending on your decision in January. It'll then go, in this case, to the community college board. I think they actually meet in February this year. And then eventually it'll go to the General Assembly, where they will approve the school to open operate and/or receive supplemental funding. So it is a long and arduous process in the next year to ensure that these schools, which have such an incredible impact but are supported, because we don't want an initiative happening that doesn't have the full buy-in. Just as a note to you, Ms. White already mentioned this, but the 7 from the last 2 years that you all have sent forward, along with the UNC board and the community colleges board, did not receive supplemental funding. And so those 7 plus this one, making an assumption that it will be approved. Of course, you all will do that next month. We will then send that forward with your approval for the funding to the General Assembly. So this year, we do have one, Gaston Early College of Medical Sciences High School, that the Joint Advisory Committee proudly recommends to you all for approval through this process. This school is incredibly innovative in ways that we really haven't seen before, and that's just what's super exciting about these schools, and at this level that the bar keeps rising in this situation, which is just exciting. So they will be partnering with Gaston College, which is part of the community college system, with 80 students per grade level as their goal. It is the second in their school district. The first one does have a waiting list and is at capacity based on the location they have. They are going to be focusing on all 3 target populations of these schools, our first gen students, our at-risk students, as well as those in need of accelerated pathways. And so we're super excited to see that all 3 will be served. This school does have a healthcare focus and very focused on the regional medical needs. In fact, looking at nursing, looking at fitness, looking at, actually tabbed it all because it's an area that I'm at, medical offices administration, human services technology, just some really incredible medical fields that they will actually be partnering with Paramount. Paramount Health, which is a business in the healthcare industry in that area. So that partnership is already making the school just an incredible gift, I think, to our students and our citizenship. But also what's exciting is they have managed a deal with Belmont Abbey to where if these students at the end of their associates or their certificates want to transfer there, it will be able to do that seamlessly to a 4-year institution, which is just exciting to have that all laid out for these students in a way that they're able to see their path forward in a very clear and succinct path. And so it really is just an exciting opportunity, and we are just so pleased to bring this forward to you for approval next month.
Amazing. Board members, questions? Tabari's given the silent clap for those who are listening in. Ms. Kamnitz.
This is so exciting, so not to put a down note on this, but there's 7 schools that we approved in the last 2 years, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
What is their status now? Do they exist, or is it impossible?
No, they did exist. One went through significant turmoil. It was also in the news a lot. One almost did not open, or open and then almost closed, and lots of iterations. It's been a challenge for those 7, for sure, because a lot of them are having challenges with, are predicting challenges, in particular in a year, when you're looking at the expenses to support college, textbooks, et cetera, supplies, but also the issues of the extra staffing, right? To have really effective advising. A lot of our schools, almost all, majority of them, use the supplemental funding to support extra college partnership activities and advising. So it's definitely not been easy. They have opened. Some of them are smaller than they had hoped. Some of them have actually not been have not been able to maintain their principal, because in the first year it's hard to get up to that 100, and so because they don't have some of that extra funding, that's been a challenge. So it's definitely been a challenge. I'm pleased to say that they are all functioning. Are they at optimal level as are others? I would say no, and I'm sure Matt could add to that as well.
So they just weren't funded. So it's not because the budget's held up this year. They just weren't funded at all?
So the budget, yes and no. So correct, those were not funded. This one would be coming in the next budget.
Right,
And-
right. So we don't know about this one, but the ones.
Correct. And part of the 7, and I'm trying to think of whether it's 2, I don't know if Isaac's in here, 2 or 3 of the 7 is because of this budget
This year.
held up.
Okay.
But it is over 2 years, the 7, and this will be potentially the 8th. I can get that for you, Ms. Kamens, I'm sorry, it's too.
No, that's clear enough.
Mr. Buxton?
One question, one comment. The diploma that's in here is I was trying to tease it out in the application. It's a diploma that's in a field, in a healthcare field.
Yes.
Right, that would put them directly into
Correct.
occupation. Okay,
Correct.
which I think is outstanding.
They also will have other diploma options as well, but their primary focus is career ready for medical.
Right, perfect, that's great. The second comment was, Madam Chair, I'm hoping that the new executive director of My Future NC might have some lobbying background and be able to help us push this over the line as a way we increase our degrees and credentials.
I think we might have some leverage there. I concur. Great, thank you. Mr. Bristow Smith.
Just two quick comments. The first one is this application, 72 pages. I read it over the Thanksgiving break and was so enamored with it that I texted Isaac Lake on Black Friday just to see was there something I was missing. And this was a phenomenal application. So excited about it. And as you said, it puts the innovative back into cooperative, innovative high schools. So excited. The second comment about the supplemental funding is that I think it's worth noting this is a school that's in a Tier 2 county, and that 5 of those other 6 schools are in Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. And so 6 of those 7 schools that have not received supplemental funding are in Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. And just, I felt like it was worth noting that one economically distressed county distinction. So, yeah, thank you for your leadership and inspiration. Always love to see you, Snow.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So then our next, and we've been waiting to hear from Dr. Ellerby all day. Let's hear in our monthly update for our Innovative School District and our JELOC report. Dr. Ellerby, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Davis and the state board members. I am so grateful to be here today to share with you updates for the Innovative School District. I am Dr. James Ellerby, and I serve as the superintendent of the Innovative School District. I will be giving you information about the JLEOC report, as well as information updating you on information that you know about Session Law 2019-248, Senate Bill 522, and giving you a brief, a very succinct update about the one school that we have in the Innovative School District. Our team always likes to go back to the strategic plan and make sure that we're viewing everything that we do between the mission and the strategic plan. In the JLEOC report, it only gives information about the history and the current updates to the ISD, as far as the process, the definition for selection to the ISD, and the process that you undertake in order to enter into the ISD. It also outlines a little bit of information from the Friday Institute, the evaluation that they did on the one school in the ISD, and I can't emphasize enough, it wasn't over the ISD systems, process, and procedures. Those are some things that we're working on now, but it's more information about the one school. We highlighted some of those things in the JLEOC report, and of course identify strategies of what we're going to do to make sure that we're proven and moving forward. According to Senate's Session Law 2019-248 and Senate Bill 522, the definition for a qualifying school is that the school is in the lowest 5% of the school performance grades and receiving Title I funds. There are some exceptions, such as alternative schools, the cooperative innovative high schools, and schools in their first or second year, or schools that we call newcomer schools. And we also must put in there the renewal school district is not included in this process. Now, the selection for the next school that will come into the ISD, which will be next year, we're required to to enter one school, and that would be the school with the lowest school performance score that will automatically be coming and transferred into the ISD. The same thing will happen the next year after that, so the 2022-23 school year, another school, the lowest school in the state of North Carolina, based upon your school performance score, will be entered into the ISD. After that, then we go, each year there's a qualifying list, but the qualifying list process will start with the new law, which means that we start with the qualifying list, and then the next year, if you're on the qualifying list, you move to the watch list, and that's the 2023-24 school year. This begins. And then you go, if you're on the qualifying list again, you go to the warning list. If you show up the qualifying list the next year, then you are selected for the ISD, and it's up to 5 schools that we will select in the year for selection. There is a voluntary selection, and that's where LEA can say that, hey, we want to enter one of our schools into the ISD. I don't know of a lot that's gonna volunteer a school, but that is an option for schools, and those are things that school districts will be made aware of. The support is not only with the state board, but with the ISD itself and our team. They're working hard to help make sure that we monitor and assist, and I will outline some of the things that we're gonna do to monitor and assist these districts and LEAs and schools in the areas of funding, strategies, and partners. The timeline I basically was talk about, but we're gonna visit all 30 LEAs where these 69 schools are lodged within the next 90 to 120 days. The first thing that happened is that there was a personal phone call to each superintendent about their school being on the qualifying list. The next thing that has happened is that we have sent out a letter to each LEA informing them of the process and the school that's on the list, and as well as an example parent letter that should be sent out to the parents or housed on the website for the qualifying schools on the list. In our monitoring, we are planning on asking a few questions about school leadership and different strategies that they're employing to make sure that this school is improving. And then we are also going to ask for what type of supports that you need. And we're going to document this information and give as much advice and support as possible. We're trying to keep a clear distinction between the regional support structure and the regional case managers and the ISD, because we don't want them to think that those folks are trying to help the ISD get schools. All of us are about support, and we're trying to make sure that we partner with these LEAs to support them in keeping schools from being on the list. As far as the school, we still have 214 students on Southside Ashpole in Rowland, North Carolina. The staff attendance for the October 24th through the 21st session was 94%, and of course the student attendance was 94.5. We're still fully staffed. These are some of the areas that we have identified for the dashboard, and we are still working on developing this dashboard because we're in preparation for additional schools to be added to the ISD. So we're trying to develop a dashboard with the Friday Institute, between NC STAR and other stakeholders that have been given information. Dr. Angie Moulinex is gonna also help and assist with us building these dashboards so that we can monitor all the schools that will be into the ISD. As far as NC check-in information, the results showed that in 5th grade reading In the language area, 4th grade reading and 5th grade science, we show some promising gains with the students in those areas. We still need to work in areas for growth with math, numbers and operations in base 10, and operations in algebraic thinking. We do believe that some of these were off because of the pacing guides, and that's why we're working with our ISO to not only establish the pacing guides and continue building those pacing guides, but at the same time being able to talk with teachers about the misconceptions that students have had on the answers that they selected in those areas. And when students, a lot of students are choosing the same answer and it's the wrong answer, it's usually that they learned it wrong or they haven't been exposed to the information and they have a way of thinking about it. So we're having to address those misconceptions. And Maxie Moore, who works with NC Check-ins, did a great job of taking us through our data so that we can actually do some things to improve in our school in Roland. We're monitoring for the pacing guides, and as well as the PLCs are continuously being built, and we're also pushing for the additional training in Eureka Math. These are some of the activities that have been going on this past cycle, and that is my update for the month.
Thank you, Dr. Ellerby. Board members, what questions do you have for Dr. Ellerby regarding the report to the JELOC and for activities at Southside Ashpole? Ms. Morris.
If we go back to the students and staff's
Yes.
allocation, do y'all have an AIG teacher there by any chance?
We have 2 AIG students.
Okay.
And there is a person there that does part-time work to address those students.
Okay.
But we do need additional work.
I'd be interested in the nurturing process for students who are high flyers there.
That's right. And we always have to look out for whether we're going to grow those students, so
Yeah.
that is on the radar.
Any other questions? I'll just add to what Dr. Ellerby shared, and social media is a great thing. And so I happen to follow Dr. Bowen on Twitter, and I also follow Achievement for All Children. And so they've put several things out recently surrounding activities at the school. One is an upcoming parent academy that they're going to host December the 12th with several different, I'm going to call them electives, that parents in the community can participate in the school, and that sort of circles upon their desire to bring parents back into the school setting for positive meetings, not just if their child's in trouble. So that was one thing. And then they had an opportunity to increase their knowledge about American Indian heritage. So they had a Native American Heritage Day, and invited some local participants to come in and do a program for the school. And so culturally relevant education is important to that community. Just thought I would highlight. If you want to follow Dr. Bowen, it's at Dr. K.L. Bowen on Twitter. Things you learn, everything you want to know, you can learn on Facebook. Yes, Mr. McKinney.
And also one of their teachers, and she was actually on the PowerPoint, is currently at NCAT and Cullowhee, participating in the Beginning Teacher of the Year Leadership Program there. And we will announce the inaugural Beginning Teacher of the Year this Thursday night. So she's one of those possibilities.
Thank you for reminding me of that.
Cool. Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Ellerby.
Thank you.
So that concludes the report part of our committee work. I do want to draw to your attention that there are 7 consent items on our agenda, and they can be found on tomorrow's agenda, but I'll just run through those briefly. EICS 4 is a recommendation for 4 new members to the North Carolina Virtual Public School Advisory Council. They are LaVon McLean from Halifax County. She's the texting coordinator there. Nicole Piggott is with Lexington City Schools. Frank Creech is the Chief Academic Officer in Greene County, and John Eldridge is the charter school representative representing Chatham Charter. So those are 4 new members. Their resumes are, dossiers are a part of that attachment. If you want to go through and read their credentials, feel free to. EICS 5 is Rocky Mount Prep's request to amend its mission statement, and they were just looking for a more succinct expression of their mission statement, so it's semantics and wordings. EICS 6, Bonnie Clone Classical in Mecklenburg County is a charter school that is going to implement a weighted lottery, and so that's before us. And they also are requesting a change in their management company from CFA to Charter 1. EICS 7 is East Charter Schools, Movement East Charter Schools request to modify its enrollment. So they received an NC Access grant, and with that, there's the provision that if you receive an Access grant, you can open with a lower enrollment. So they're requesting that. EICS 8 is Team CFA, Community Public Charters request to implement a weighted lottery. Again, I'm looking to allow more opportunities for charter school for some of our low wealth students. And then EICS 9, Robert J. Brown Leadership Academy's request to relinquish its charter. They had a delay, they were in a 1-year delay anyway, so they're just going to relinquish their charter altogether. And then EICS 10 is Wilson County's restart application approval, and we had a discussion about that last month. So take a look at those. They're all on consent. Mr. Chair, that concludes our report.
Thank you, Ms. White. We'll now take a break and reconvene at 3:30.
I saw your email. Mr. Chastain. Yeah. All you can do, right?
Well, I tried to find it. Randy, did you send it to
The
my?
weirdest thing is, I couldn't find that I had sent it.
I sent it, because
thought
I
I
got
had.
it, but then I couldn't find.
The members from our board.
Yeah, I could send it to you right now.
Let me just make sure. It came from you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. Here it is.
Okay, because that'll save us some time tomorrow.
Doing that in the morning, right?
That was the only time.
Good job.
I do think it's worth taking up the plus it shows our interest in figuring out a way to make it work.
Yeah. I don't have the finances in my head. I mean, you keep saying foundations are supporting it, but at some point it's going to cost.
I thought about bringing that up in budget discussion, but made a comment. You have it.
Right. So I mentioned the Carnegie Foundation.
Is it open?
Pretty strong.
Pretty good foundation.
So.
Yes, hi, good to see you.
Yeah.
We've never met in person.
We're meeting at 7:45, but I'll probably just leave. Can we just text you or call you?
Yeah. I mean, you covered it, so I didn't bring it up, but I mean, it was hard going along with a 10-year plan.
I know. We
didn't even get to half of the first year.
When the
It's not, I mean.
we did 70, the governor asked for 40.
Do the
We did that.
badge, so.
And a lot of that's non-recurring, grants that frankly, you, as a mental health provider, are you gonna go in on?
Anna, can she put those out for people to look at?
All that grant.
So all you get is,
No stability.
all you get is.
have to have, like when we have materials like this, I have to
Okay.
So you don't get
Yeah, we don't have to then. Well, we can just say as if people want
relationships that need to
them
be
available to look at.
Why you would even, this notion of life grant, spending an enormous amount of money on
And then people want to.
to me, that's just flushing. It's all that. I mean, if our educators are not capable of dispensing with appropriate disciplinary actions in elementary school, then our EP situation is even worse off than we thought.
Exactly.
Sorry, but I added to that.
So,
Back out and make sure. Do you know
this
Lawrence
last
has?
presentation.
see the thing is.
Lauren's got hers.
Hey, man, how are you?
I said, I look like me.
So nice to see you.
That's fine. Well, that's fine.
How are you?
Thank you.
Fine. How are things going?
That's
Is it school that's built?
What brings you?
Built for school.
This, I'm sorry, this is
Okay, let me ask a question about that.
Yeah.
all well-intended and well-delivered.
No, it was gonna be available to us, but I'm sure they won't have it in Macon. They're not gonna sit in Macon.
That's Kathleen.
They will look for something else to read.
But I have another item.
I thought they were gonna present,
Now,
but it's short.
classes that will address, we've already looked at.
Well, I do think that's
Yeah,
fine.
yes, yes.
But you know who's keeping you straight.
Who's targeted to, already to open?
Right, that'll depend on questions.
We've looked at what recommendation is.
So what kind of things?
You always get so much hell out there. You've got so many damn questions come at you that you aren't even in control of. Do you understand? I would. Do you understand? I wouldn't direct it that way. That's why I turned to you.
Charter school people, which I know is next week. If we could be about.
Never saw that coming. Come on, what else?
From the town.
Oh, very good.
Let's go back to this. Woody would be there. I think we know about, they basically told.
Doctor.
She's with.
The Old Main Street?
Somehow, it's not understood. It was a term that was knowledgeable education. That's why when we went back, Steve, he said straight.
I completely get what you're saying.
Everything.
No, I think you hit that perfectly.
You know, we were going to town, university, provost, all of
I mean, the Charter School Advisory Board.
wonderful things.
First, it was 4 to 3.
Everybody
And they went back and another month, they reviewed the application, they got a process. Like, while I think important, changed.
Mistakes
We'll have a seat. Thank you. He emailed all of us and said, hey,
So, you know,
we
there, but it sure is in environment around there.
I have
Sources, that's the oh, and if that's the piece that it fits.
A little different take than Austin. Very, it's interesting.
Everything's gonna be all right as you gone.
You know, that's the putting those pieces. You know, when it's over to the properties, that has to be done. And Cindy,
What I wanted to say to Austin was, man, not everybody's got it. My concern is if our graduating history, personal finance, credential, background training, we're sending them curriculum that you
Jill said if they don't have the background, and that's something that Austin, I think,
30 days, and 15.
Can do. Passionate about seeing the effect on people's lives. Well, that's a good idea too. I'll have it. So that's even better than the Bible.
Yeah. So, and he says in his email, he says, like, this is my point of view, this is my perspective.
That really helps.
I really appreciated how thoughtful and analytical and balanced it was.
You two are like very similar, like mine. So you walked away from your school. Kind of similar.
Stop it.
You know, I want to connect you too. Can you do anything in the summertime, work-wise?
I'm 12 months.
You are. I would love for you to consider letting you do hours with me. It would just be a great Yes, you would.
The early college setting is so different than traditional school. And so my administrative intern, traditional school, high school, and I was able to pivot my background in education and from my internship in the tradition setting into an early college. I had been hired into it. I think I would have done and considering the same early college. slow down, speed up. I mean, it's interesting. It's almost like the minute school gets out, we immediately start preparing for next year. But it's a lot of,
Good to see you.
like there are no kids in the building.
We have traditional, you know what I'm saying? So people actually
But I could use an extra set of hands, and I do think he would learn a lot. There's a book I want to give him. I want to give you
No worries if not. I just
an interesting holiday gift. It's a book he's probably already got. I just think so.
Stand. You know, it was sent back. It's one like, this is still, I'm monitored. State school. This is not. No, it's like the door is open.
We already talked about Lindsay Red. I knew her. I just got mixed up.
Text you. I left my phone in the car. He gets the, we have listened to. I have access.
That child.
I would just do that.
My comment about pre-K and Alexander. I know we all agree on that.
He's showing out. He's showing out for the holiday. Is what he's doing.
I don't know how to respond. Yesterday I was in Houston, Chief. Let it didn't come with that. I would not do what I got you. I probably. Most people know me when they do see me. Come on and say hi. I will, man. I will. Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Don't have time to do that fine tuning.
That's right.
Do we need to take her off the menu? She get the memo.
Any parking? I found some rice. Found some ice.
So you got
Now, you should be in. Oh, okay. People give you a
I think we just want to touch base on 5 or 6 things. Overburn means I
We'll proceed to our final committee meeting of the day, which is our Student Learning and Achievement Committee, chaired by Mr. J.B. Buxton. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is the SLA committee, and I'm joined on the SLA committee by Dr. Olivia Oxendine, who is joining us by phone right now. Dr. Oxendine, I just want to make sure you're back with us. Oh, she's listening. She can't. Okay. Who is listening by phone? So she is with us. We have on the agenda today a number of action items. We're going to do 2 action items to start, and then we're going to do an action item that was a discussion item last month, but because Dr. Howard could not be with us, we postponed the presentation to this month. So we'll have that as our 3rd action item, then we have a couple discussion items, an update on our early literacy framework, and then 3 consent items that we'll go through. We're going to start with SLA 1, which is our high school diploma endorsements revision. Ms. Shaw Coltrane is coming up, and I just remind the board we have 5 high school graduation endorsements. 2 of them are board endorsements, 3 of them are legislative endorsements. There was some action in the General Assembly this last session that affects the legislative endorsements, and we've got to make some changes to our policy as a result. Coltrane.
That's fantastic. He's done the entire presentation. So basically.
I listen to committee.
I love it. I love it. No, so we do have our 5. 2 of them are initiated by you all, academic scholars and our global languages endorsement. However, there are 3, our career college and college UNC, which the intent of those endorsements are to indicate on a high school diploma and the transcript the achievements of a student beyond just scores, beyond just a GPA. And so currently the career college UNC represent readiness measures. So the college represents community college multiple measures, UNC endorsement represents minimum course requirements, and career is related to credentials and credential certifications. And so your Grad 07 is the current requirements, and just as a reminder, which we do in a report to you all every fall, last year 65% of all graduates earned at least one high school endorsement. So what we've brought to you, though, is we do have some changes. These changes had been passed a few years ago, a couple of years ago, and the board as well as the department worked to actually get it changed. Part of the issue now is that as an overlay of all the other requirements, a student now has to receive the readiness benchmark for a nationally normed reference test. So in other terms, typically the ACT or the SAT. And so where you had students receiving these, you now have this on top of that layer. And so we had hoped to get that changed because the board and DPI staff felt like that wasn't necessarily the intent of these endorsements. In fact, this benchmark is actually higher than the UNC MIN benchmark. So, but needless to say, we have moved forward, and I'm so pleased Power School has worked very, very diligently, the Power School team here. And we have a program to where it will keep the initial programming intact, because we also still have to keep reporting the numbers that would receive it without the ACT as well. Then the ACT is laid over it. Of course, we only have ownership of one ACT score because we only administer one. So then LEAs will have to input any additional scores a student may have. So if, you know, my daughter takes it in 11th grade, well, next year she will more than likely take it multiple times. I would then have to send it in to the advisor, and somebody at the school would have to override that in the system. So we have that ready to go upon your approval. I will say we do expect a significant decline in the number of endorsements. Yeah, we expect that.
Thank you, Ms. Shockold-Train. Questions about this? Again, this is a
I don't know how to end that
policy.
Just kind of ended that. Usually I'm a little bit more graceful, but this time I decided to keep my mouth shut. Don't believe it or not. You should be so proud of me.
We are. Questions to this adjustment per legislative action?
I have a quick comment.
Please, Mr. Smith.
And I just want to ask as a point of clarification, is the requirement that students meet the college and career ready benchmark for the ACT in order to receive any of the 5 endorsements, or just the college endorsement, or just the college UNC endorsement?
Good question.
It'll be the 3 legislated endorsements: the career, the college, and the college UNC endorsement. We have not programmed that in, making the assumption, since it was not legislated and there's no policy change, for academic scholars and global languages to stay the same.
And so, as another point of clarification, the college-ready benchmarks for the ACT are typically 22 for the subject area tests. One of the subject area tests is an 18. Our state ACT average is 19.1 and has been consistent for 5 years, 18.9 to 19.1. The UNC minimum ACT is a 17.
And some will say even lower, but yes.
And so, in order to receive the college UNC endorsement, students would have to achieve the college ready benchmark, which is 5 ACT composite points higher than the UNC minimum.
Correct.
Okay, just checking.
Okay, we will take action on first reading on this adjustment to policy tomorrow. Second item is SLA 2, which is a report on broadening access and successful participation in advanced courses. We're going to have our annual report. We also are going to have a presentation from Dr. Kathleen Koch, I believe, AP, but we'll start with Ms. Shaw-Coltrane.
Yes, I get to be up here a lot this afternoon. I will hopefully be a little bit more graceful than I was earlier. So we bring to you our annual report on advanced courses. You have the presentation online while I know Lawrence is doing his magic up here. And we do have Kathleen with us from College Board. I also want to make sure to recognize that Cross, our team member who took the lead with this report. That's her first presentation to the board. This time, looking at the data, asked that I be the bearer of the news. The foundation of this work is in the legislation, broadening access and successful participation. I'm given some of the background of our new members. The goal is to increase access to advanced courses across the state, as well as to increase success in the participation of those courses. We're really looking at advanced courses here, being those with AP, College Board, International Baccalaureate courses, and Cambridge courses. This year, you do not yet have Cambridge data, as this will be the first year. You'll have that next year. But we do have our AP and IB data here with us. This is very aligned to your strategic plan to eliminate opportunity gaps. You specifically actually address a lot of the issues in here, as well as your goal 2 and your goal 3 as well. The goals of the legislation really is to build capacity for success. With that, we are legislated to have a partner, which is our friends, College Board with us, and they focus their work with us through the North Carolina AP Partnership. We're one of very few states across the country that has this incredible relationship and this incredible support with College Board here. The other real goal of it is to fund access. So as of 5 years ago, we now fund all test fees for AP, IB, and Cambridge courses for those students who are enrolled in those courses. So we want to build capacity with our teaching core, right, and ensure they have what they need to be able to have the capacity to promote success with their students, and then ensure our students really have what they need, and that really supports our division and your focus on equity and excellence as well. So for build capacity, I want to briefly talk about the interventions of the AP partnership. Kathleen is going to go into a lot more details, but I want to frame it out for you. We do have an annual contract with the College Board at $2.15. It's actually over 2 years, so I'll fix that before it's finally posted. We do targeted district support with our low-performing districts, and so Kathleen's going to go into great detail, but really focus on technical assistance on site with them, intentional strategic PD, looking at really building the pipeline, looking at rigor across the years. How are we ensuring that our students are prepared? All students have the opportunity to be prepared for this advanced rigor in high school. And then we also have a really unique part of our partnership, though other states may be doing it now, where we've actually also added statewide support. So while Kathleen and her team focus really on targeted support with certain districts, we're also offering statewide PD, including scholarships to AP Summer Institute training, AP annual conferences, a mentorship program for new teachers or any teacher that needs support. It's pretty remarkable, all of the interventions we've done. Our coverage last year was a little over $13,743,000, give or take, for all of the test fees. We continue to see the increase in course availability in local courses, but as well through Liz and VPS and the School of Math and Science. Both of those are huge partners. This whole initiative does support the idea of equity and excellence. We have some highlights in this year's data. I will say, and I know some of you have looked at this, and Kathleen and I are going to talk about it, but we do have, for the very first time, even though we have all these interventions in place, For the first time in 5 years, we're seeing a decrease. But we have a few shining stars that I want to highlight, and again, Kathleen will talk about more, is that we do continue to outpace participation and performance for our Hispanic students compared to nationwide. And overall, and the long relationship with this partnership with our Black students, but not necessarily in this past year. This past year, we have seen sorry, it just stopped. Oh, yeah. This past year, we have seen a decrease in, the next one would be perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. In our course enrollment, which we had predicted, but it's a lot more than what we had hoped. Close to a 5% for this year decrease. So the data that you're going to see in the exams have to do with the 1% decrease from last year. But I wanted to show you this year's course enrollment decrease to get you ready for this year's upcoming data with that. So we are seeing a decrease in the last 2 years. We still have an overall 8% in student growth in course enrollment, but we are saddened for the first time. I mean, I'm usually up here giving incredible news of the incredible work that's happening with all of the interventions we're giving, but we did see a decrease this year, and we can talk a little bit about that. Mr. Buxton asked me, these are the exam data. Kathleen is going to go over this. 1.5 decrease in our exam takers, almost 4% on the exams taken, and even a decrease in the success within those that we were taking. Very contrary to double digits of success in years past. So what we are doing is really analyzing some of the systemic issues causing some of these decrease. Where Mr. Buxton and Ms. Kamnitz and others have asked, and Dr. Oxendine on the committee call, but we are thinking about, if the board would like, potentially a possible survey to better really understand what's happening, look at some policy and more clear advising. I do have some ideas of why some of this is happening, and I'm happy to have that conversation if that's something the board would like to do.
Let me get some questions here. I know Ms.
Sure.
Kamnitz has one.
I would like to take you up on that offer. I had heard some rumors locally that that the numbers might reveal this year, and I'm curious if you're comfortable answering what you think is going on. What are the forces that you think might be causing it?
So this is all from qualitative and anecdotal data, but real examples. I can give examples of people and districts who have talked to me even just as recently as 2 weeks ago. I do believe there is a challenge between AP and other advanced coursework and our dual enrollment. And I do believe there is more incentives for dual enrollment that are structurally built outside of discussions of rigor and that, which we can all, have different views on that. But when we look at the incentives that are given, what districts and superintendents tell me is that this was predicted. In dual enrollment, you are double funded. So a student who takes art at the college, that class is still funded at the school level. Takes English, takes bio, any community college course that a student takes at a community college in the FTE, which is wonderful, the FTE gets covered. And it's also wonderful, right, that the school is able to still use that funds to supplement and work with all the other needs schools have. So it's not to say that one shouldn't be, but that I do believe from many of the conversations I have had is an incentive for that that is impacting this. I also do believe the whole issue of credits. We've discussed this here with the board. I know our new members may not be as well. One is very knowledgeable, and I'm happy to fill in. But how our credits transfer. So typically, for most of our graduation requirements, At the community college, it's 2 semester courses, right? Because our credits are typically a year. Those 2 semester credits transfer as 2 course credits. So if a child takes 1 AP course, this is not even getting into the conversation of the weighting, but they all are college level, you're going to get 1 B, for example, for an AP English course, AP Lang. If you take 110 and 112, or 110, 111, I always forget the numbers, at the community college, which also gets you graduation, you've just gotten 2 credits into the GPA and into your course graduation requirements. So these are the challenges we've talked about here of how to merge systems, and there's just a lot of challenges, and when we keep growing. So I do think that this incentives are there and they're catching up to the system. I also think further advising is needed. We have students who sometimes, I think, we all need to be better aware of post-secondary. If you're going out of state, what does that look like? You know, where are you applying? What are you thinking about? It's so easy to pick either one option, and we just have to be, I think, better generally. And I mentioned this with CCP as well. All of these programs are growing so fast. How do we better advise all of our students with all these great opportunities? That's my initial thinking.
Mr. Ford.
Thank you. So one is I just want to say I appreciate you doing this work and presenting this to us. And it is sort of a disappointment to see decreased in exam takers. And if I'm understanding this right, there's been a decrease in both enrollment and in test takers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And in success of the testing.
And in success, those achieving 3 or above, yeah? Yes. Okay. But I appreciate you also offering some of what may be the root causes of that, because I think that, that's hard for these data to capture, and that requires more investigation. The question I have is there, I know you pulled out some of the trends, but do we have like a comprehensive look in graphic form of what the trends are for each student subgroup, like succinctly? So I know for Black students in particular, there's been a decrease in exam test takers. Have they, is the individual story of each subgroup the same, or are they similar? I want to get a better picture of what's happening with each subgroup.
Sure. Kathleen and I will definitely work on getting that for you. It's not in this.
Right.
We have that reported in each report, but we've never compiled it, so we'd be happy to do that.
Got you. So that's sort of one of the questions I have. And then I wonder, is there a way for us to capture what's happening with the dual enrollment piece, right? Like, so to be able to put the two together to say, oh, okay, this is kind of the other half of the story, because right now it only seems like we're capturing a fraction of it, to see what the dual enrollment numbers are as well. So I don't know if that's a possibility. Maybe that's not in your purview, maybe.
Oh, that is in my area, believe it or not, but no, it is. But that report will come in March. And so that report, we're gathering all of the CCP data now. So what I was hoping is after we get both sets, we could actually do some more digging as well. Excellent. And possibly do the survey.
Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Does this data include the charter school results?
Yes, it does.
I had trouble finding those. I'll look.
It does in all of the numbers. All the charter schools are represented, and in the list we do have the charter schools.
Okay, that's helpful.
If they offer them. Yeah, if they offer the courses.
Ms. Kamnitz?
You mentioned the weighting, and so from what I understand, for purposes of grade point average, so if a student took an AP English course at the high school, they would get
one extra credit
one
point.
But you get double. So it's not just your credits, but does it also go into your grade point average as a double?
So you don't technically get double. What all the college level courses are the same. It does now include all of the comprehensive articulation agreement courses, which are hundreds at the community college, but they all transfer. All AP courses now transfer as well to UNC, and IB just last week got approved. So all the courses do transfer, and the AP and IB are dependent on the score. However, when you look at graduation requirements, most of our graduation requirements require 2 community college courses because they're semester credits.
Right.
So that's where you get the incentive in that GPA outside of the weighting issue.
And one more.
Please follow.
So the question, the courses that are required for graduation in this state can be taken either at the high school or at the community college?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there alignment in the content of those courses?
So there is basic alignment from the sense that it's freshman year English, and we have said, okay, that satisfies high school English, but there is not direct alignment in the standard course of study. The community college does not have a standard course of study, so we have, early on when CCP began, with our cooperative innovative, so if you take bio, we'll take that for our credit. It supplants it, but no, I do not believe there is direct alignment.
I'm going to ask Dr. Koch, Ms. Koch, to come up. I want to make sure
Yeah.
President Tiffany Rogers doesn't want to get in on this conversation. Or am I opening up a can of worms by recognizing
Yeah, you are, and it's probably best that I keep quiet right now.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I think before we transition here, Ms. Shawcoulter, I think we will want to take you up on when this next data collection round comes up in the spring to come revisit this conversation, and that might be an appropriate time to
I think that would be great.
engage you in this
I
conversation.
think
Okay, so we'll look to put something on the agenda at the appropriate time when we get some more data.
And I think
All right.
it's important that for each child, each path brings different strengths. And so it's not about, A versus B, but there are reasons, right? While X grows, the other one may or may not grow, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sneha.
JB.
Chairman
Hold-
Davis,
hold on,
members of the board.
One second,
Oh,
one second.
sorry.
You want to do it now? I'll give you.
Yeah, I would be remiss
Mr.
if I don't
Wallace,
say
go
this.
ahead.
This is the second bite at this apple. I said the same thing probably this time last year.
Okay.
Speaking for the children of this great state, the test only being administered in May is a big roadblock. I know to a lot of my partners, students, and mine, and I think I speak for a lot of principals, being that there's a gap when you finish the course. If you're on the college calendar, you're done in December, you can't take it till May. If you're on our calendar that we have traditional, we're done January 20th, there's still a gap until May. And I asked this question last year, is there any consideration? It was a flat out no. So that's one piece of the pie in this particular situation, that big gap. In other words, some districts are offering it, you get 1 credit for 2 semesters of classes so you can prepare to take the test in AP. So the test administration is a big roadblock, as y'all asked before. That's one big one right there for the students. So they just go to the college and take it, and then take the test and get the credit.
It would be great if we had the College Board here to answer a question.
Yeah, that's true.
Wait, did she just leave?
No, I do remember this conversation last year, but we welcome you. Before you started, I just want to say we welcome you. We appreciate the partnership we have with the College Board in this state. You are here every year when we ask, and more than that, to help support the work. And so
Absolutely.
we thank you for coming and joining us, and want to give you the floor.
Thank you. It's our great pleasure to do this work. As a fellow North Carolinian and a parent of 2 public school students in North Carolina, it is deeply meaningful to me, this work, and so thank you so much. And sir, to your point, before I even dive in, let me just say to you that, the College Board serves over 1.8 million students nationwide. Of that 1.8 million, just over 75,000 of those are in the state of North Carolina. Of that group, believe it or not, the majority are not on semester, they're on year-long schedule. Yes, but I feel your pain because I work in districts where they do have spring semester courses. And so we're working really hard to dig in with those districts and find the best solutions we can. I think what I'm gonna share with you today might make you feel a little better, so we'll hold till the end and see what we think. But we and the College Board have been offering advanced placement courses for over 60 years across the nation. I can tell you all that we are just really excited about a paradigm shift that's actually happened. It's in place just this year, and I see Freebird had to step out, but I hope he'll come back because I think he'll share with you the excitement among the AP community about this paradigm shift that I'm about to share with you. So throughout that 60 years, the AP program continues to evolve. It will do so into the future, but I think our latest developments are really just very exciting. I would be remiss if I did not start out this presentation by once again celebrating the first full year implementation of the UNC Systems AP credit policy, which brings uniform credit across the state to our students who earn qualifying scores. You guys will, of course, remember that this is a third-party evaluated exam. It means a great deal to these colleges and universities when our students receive qualifying scores, and they want to reward our students for those efforts, that they've earned that credit. And so we're thrilled that, you know, in this past, this is very meaningful. It really matters, this policy, and that's why we celebrate it, because last year alone, that could have, if every student had used their credit, right, who earned a qualifying score, that could have amounted to $63 million worth of savings for our students across the state. So this is not small dollars. This is big money for our, and I hear stories anecdotally every day in my work from students who say to us, thank you so much. And in fact, I want to lift up the UNC System Office, because they didn't just put it in place, they went back. And they're finding students, and students who are already in college. I had a sophomore. Her mother came up to me in a meeting, and she stopped me in the hall, and she said, thank you so much. My daughter just got retro credit that we didn't even know was coming her way. So it's just really exciting. So with that said, I will share with you that we are saddened, to be frank, about this decline, but I think I'm feeling personally really good about what we're going to see as a rebound because of what I'm about to share with you about new resources. So this is what Sneha just shared. It's just presented a little differently, but you can see the trajectory over the past 5 years. Certainly, we are looking for that gap to narrow between performance and participation. We want every student who takes an AP course to get a qualifying score so that they can then get college credit. But we know even for our students who don't have a bang-up exam that day and they receive a 1 or a 2, they are statistically more likely to complete college in 4 years than any other group, dual enrollment included. I will share with you that our partnership has been focused on underserved students since the beginning, the inception of the partnership. We do pull out those numbers, and so Mr. Ford, I am psyched. I would love to sit down with you, and I'm a data geek, so we could pull that to death. So as Sine highlighted, every year we've been able to celebrate both our Hispanic and our Black students outpacing the nation. This is the first year that our Black students had a slight decrease. Our Hispanic students continue to outpace the nation. When I say participation, that's of course taking the exam. When I say performance, that's getting a 3, 4, or 5, that qualifying score. So just as I go forward, that's what I'm talking about. These are some big takeaways. So I wanted to just give you these graphs. This is obviously a decade's worth of information, so this is even pre-partnership. But I just want to highlight that even though we had this dip in the past year, we need to celebrate the good work of our districts. Guys, I see incredible teaching every day when I'm out in schools. I see students who are engaged and deeply committed to the work that they're doing. Over this last decade, we've had an increase of 77% in our state in the participation in these challenging college level courses, and we've had an increase of 64% in our performance. So getting those 3, 4s, and 5s to get college credit. All of that said, I've been leading up to this, so this year really marks sort of a milestone for the AP program. In that 60 years, the College Board has always created a framework and given that to teachers and said, this is what you're accountable to teach, right, in the AP. So they give them that framework for their curriculum, but they haven't really been embedded or really very active in helping teachers know how to teach that content. Does that make sense? So they gave them a curriculum framework and they said, okay, it's up to you to figure out how to do that. For years, I was an AP teacher, I was an AP administrator. We've been asking the College Board, please give us more supports. And boy, I have to say, have they delivered. So Sneha's gonna be Vanna. So I have up here some examples, but every AP teacher in the nation over this last summer and this fall have received their new, we call them the binders. We're very excited about these. These are print resources that provide just a new level of support and transparency, not only for our teachers, but for our students. Some teachers, surprise, surprise, like things in print. So we gave it to them in print because they asked for that. But all of these resources that are provided are actually part of a blended learning platform. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about both tools, okay? Because they're connected and they're replicated, if that makes sense. So if I'm an AP US History teacher, I got my binder in the mail for free. All of this is for free. I want to make sure you understand that. The cost of AP exams did not go up this year, so same cost. Everyone got their binders. Our AP teachers started to dig in, and they said, wow, this is pretty powerful stuff. And we said, yeah, and there's more. And so the more is what we call AP Classroom. And so the power of this, I think, is really that these resources highlight what we know are the strongest tenets of instruction. That is, they teach for understanding, but they also teach for transfer. So dispersed in these notebooks are resources that allow our teachers to both teach content and skills, but also it makes it easier for our teachers to better prepare their students for the AP exam, to know what to really focus on in the curriculum, because we all know, those of us who are past teachers, some things are more important than others in our curriculum. And it also provides a renewed level of real transparency, both for our teachers and our students, so our students know how to practice and what to practice, and they can see their progress. So not only are these materials blended learning tools, as you'll see on the screen, this is an example of a unit guide in, I think this is AP Gov and Politics. So you'll see Foundations of American Democracy. This is one of the units. And so each of those colors is a link. Teachers can dive into not only the content, but the skills that we provide activities to help the teacher have their students practice those skills. Teachers are still in control. So it's not like a student can go on this blended learning platform and just teach themselves. Teachers still assign things, they assign activities, they can use what they want. They don't have to use any of it if they don't want to. We certainly hope they will. And teachers are raving about these things, so we feel really confident that this is going to be very helpful to them. But I think even more important is that it gives an opportunity not only for our teachers to get formative assessment data with embedded formative assessments, but it gives our students a chance to look at their own learning. So a real basic tenet of this is that this is not a test bank, right? We're not giving teachers just a test bank. That is part of it. There is a question bank with 15,000 old AP exam items. Can you imagine? It's sort of overwhelming to hear that. Every old AP question is on it digitally. Teachers can modify them. They can make their own tests. It's a huge time saver. But for me, as an educator, the most important part are these formative assessments. So students can actually, you gotta love technology, they can go on their smartphones if they wish, and they can look at their progress dashboard and see how they've done on these formative assessments over the course of the unit. And they're color-coded. Green means you're doing excellent. Yellow, you might want to do some work. And so it's really helping our students to gauge, where do I need to do more of my studying? Where do I need to practice more? Of course, this dashboard is also available to our teachers and our principals, so they can really dig into the data during the year and see how are my students doing and how can I best support them. Again, all of this is free. It's available for every one of our AP courses. And so we're really excited about this. It's pretty phenomenal, I have to say. And I'm just saying that as a past teacher. I would have died to have had
Well,
this.
and what, if I can interject, I think it's incredible for our teachers who may not have as much experience. So when you have, I always get the call, I have a teacher, they couldn't make it to the training, we don't have a mentor. Well, now they at least, they have this to really scaffold their own learning, and it's pretty remarkable, actually.
I would be remiss if today I didn't talk about our fastest growing new AP course here in North Carolina. And of course today, when you heard about computer science this morning, it ties right in, so that's wonderful. Our newest AP course is AP Computer Science Principles, which I have talked to this board about in the past, but I'm so pleased to tell you about the incredibly fast trajectory of the growth of our computer science courses and success. So guys, the second bullet up there is worth noting. So we had over 2,700 AP computer science exams administered last May. 70% of those got a qualifying score of 3, 4, or 5. That is a very high number if you look at AP. Typically, different courses vary, but typically it is not that high. of students who get qualifying scores on that rigorous exam. So we're really excited about the energy around this, how our schools are just really welcoming this into their offerings. And so you can see the breakdown there. This past year, we had 154 schools that offered either AP Computer Science Principles, AP Computer Science A, which is our other course, or both. And so we broke it down there. This is obviously public school data, which includes our charter schools. So we have, the College Board has actually partnered using outside grant funds, not part of the legislative funds, but outside grant funds, to support the training of teachers in AP Computer Science Principles. And so we are grateful to Code.org and the Friday Institute who have partnered with us to get the word out and to continue to get more teachers trained. So we will continue that good work, and we're just really excited about the spread of coding in North Carolina. It's really exciting. So Sneha mentioned our two-tiered approach to this work. Of course, there are some things that we do statewide, and so we do touch every LEA in North Carolina, but we also have our group of, this year, you can see them on the screen, there are 21 target districts who we work with very closely. Many of these districts tend to be more rural. We work with Green, Dr. Miller and I are good friends, other counties around the state, to really say, how can we help you? We let them lead the work, right? They're telling us, myself and my team, there are 3 of us who serve this state and reach out to these schools and work very, very closely with them. We're in their districts, we're doing walkthroughs, we are doing data dives, we're doing all that good work, but at the same time, we're offering additional PD for that group of 21 districts that isn't available statewide. So you can see I broke up what we're doing, our services. The first group is statewide. Sneha mentioned all of those things. Those are scholarships. This is a huge amount of the pot. Last year, we sent, I think, over 450 teachers to AP Summer Institute, which is a week-long institute. The scholarships cover the cost of the institute, plus a daily stipend to the teachers, plus travel to the district. So it's a really big chunk. We know that we hear from districts, we're continually asking for feedback. They tell us that's the best use of those dollars for them. We also offer several other things statewide, including fall one-day workshops, pre-AP readiness workshops, mentoring, and then we have some events that we do just for those target districts where we bring them together so they can work together because they have very like issues, as you can imagine. Edgecombe County is part of that work, and they are a wonderful partner with us. Yep. All of this information is on our website, ncappartnership.org. I welcome you to go there. Districts can go there whenever we have scholarships that roll out. We announce them there as well as on emails to district contacts. And this is our team, so we are here to serve you. If you have any questions for me today, I'm happy to answer, and you are welcome to reach out to any of us at any time, and we're here to serve you.
Ms. Koch, thank you very much. Appreciate again your being here. Any burning questions? Yes.
Just briefly, and I apologize for not knowing the answer to this question, but when a teacher participates in one of those workshops, do they get continuing education credit?
They do, yes, ma'am.
So this would be a badging that we talked about this morning. This is one of
Could
those
be.
little badges.
You get a stipend
Right.
too.
Yep,
You get a stipend too.
Thank you, Ms. White, and thank you for bringing, Mr. Duncan is especially appreciative, I'll get you 1 second, for the notebooks. He would like that as a teacher. But we appreciate you bringing the new information, and I'm gonna close this out with one more, Mr. Ford.
So appreciative, Mr. Buxton. So the question I have maybe for both of you all, and it's maybe a simple one for the lay folks out here, but how does a student even find out about AP courses, right? So like, and that's not necessarily in the report, but just, you know, how does a student find out about enrollment in AP courses? Like, how does that process operate? What does it look like, et cetera?
That's a great question. I think that it's something that we all need to be talking about, right?
Right.
So I can tell you that the basic answer that I would give as an educator is it's a school level communication typically. Now what I will tell you is that the College Board has realized, certainly over the last 5 years, very vigorously, that some of our students aren't getting the message for whatever reason. And so they've started a direct outreach campaign to students themselves, especially our underserved students who for whatever reason aren't getting that invitation to the table. that is the work that me and my partners do so closely with our districts. We make them realize by looking at data, by having those crucial conversations, is there a culture at the school where everyone feels invited to the table? And so much of the work we do, sure, it's around data and all of that, but it's also really deep discussions about culture. And I would invite you, maybe offline we can talk more about that, because some of it goes really deep. And we actually had a new event last year that I came here and talked about. We were talking about going to Wild Acres, and some of you said, oh, we want to come, and I invited you. None of you came. All right. But we went, and I'll highlight Robeson County. Robeson County was one of the districts that came. There were others, but they sent a team of 6 people, and these people hung with us, and they escaped with us for a weekend. They gave up their free time on a weekend. We went to the mountains. We were isolated in the middle of nowhere. If you know Little Switzerland, you really are in the middle of nowhere. But it's the most beautiful place on the planet, I would argue. And we really dug into just what you're talking about, those issues of culture and of access and of how we can drive that conversation in a district in a respectful, open, meaningful way, and what that looks like. And they tackled that together as teams. So they brought an entire K-12 team, and they sat and they just worked on it. And it was amazing to see. And so I know that's just a little microcosm, but just so you know, it's very deep work, and it doesn't happen overnight, but we feel the difference. We go into districts now, and I'm not telling tales. We walk in AP classrooms like we've never seen before. AP classrooms where everyone is Black. Like, we didn't see that in the past. I'm just being honest.
Yeah,
and I just got a text yesterday from one of my colleagues, Michelle, who I work with, and she said, you won't believe the classroom I was just in. And every single kid in the classroom was a minority. And this wasn't a small classroom, it was full. We just never saw that before. So that's just a little anecdote, but it's meaningful because that's real, right?
Yeah. I'll wait for that invitation as well.
Yeah.
Little Switch.
You're welcome.
All right.
We're going in May. I'll send you the dates.
Okay.
Good, thank you, Mr. Ford. And I think that's probably something we're gonna wanna fold into our conversation, get some more data back and look at what the advising looks like and how we're recruiting and not just taking anyone who comes, but recruiting kids into these opportunities. So thank you. I'd remind board members, this is an action on first read where we vote to accept this report. And we thank again the College Board for being here with us. All right, I'm going to bring up Dr. Howard, Tammy Howard, for SLA 3. I'll remind you that we've had this for a couple months. We did not go through it last month because Dr. Howard couldn't be with us. This is our testing, statewide administration of the testing program report to the General Assembly. We'll take action on this tomorrow as well to vote whether to accept this report. Dr. Howard's going to bring us through this annual.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. And this presentation has 2 purposes. One is to officially present this annual report on the status of the state testing program and local testing that occurs across the state. This is an annual report. We'll spend a few minutes talking about that. And then the second purpose, I was asked to just briefly touch on the legislation from this past summer on reducing testing in the state. And so we'll have some points to make there as well. So back to the actual report, it is split into 2 sections. One section is a requirement that we publish the statewide testing calendar, both for the current year and for the year next year, which will be 2020-21. And as similar to the report on the requirements for the local testing, we're required to tell how much time is required of those tests, where the funding source comes from those tests, information such as that. That is the first part of the report. Then the second part turns to the locally administered assessments, and individuals at the local level have to complete a survey that we then turn around and produce in this report the aggregate results. And it addresses some questions that are required in legislation. Again, the source of fundings. Again, the time that's required to administer each test, whether the test is computer administered or if it's paper pencil, when results are provided to parents, and the type of the test, the purpose, and the use of the results are really to hit some of the highlights. And looking at the results in the report this year as compared to last year, there are not really any significant differences. But as you'll see, once we get to one of the slides in the PowerPoint, the legislation was modified this past summer. Going forward and beginning in 2020, in even-numbered years, the requirement will be that locals have to provide that they are not exceeding what the state is doing with reference to the number of the test and the time to administer the test. And if that is exceeded, then they'll have to provide a justification for that to the State Board of Education, which will be reviewed. And of course, it may be approved if progress is being made toward getting to that state average. So at this time, we haven't dug deeply into how we're going to process all that information and present that to you for consideration. I'm sure there'll be much more conversation about that going forward. So with respect to other testing updates, just a reminder, I'm sure everyone is aware of this, that the NC final exams, this is the last academic school year for the administration of these assessments. And there is the requirement in legislation for a report to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee by March 15th of 2020 of what measures should be used to report educator effectiveness. And of course, in accountability, we produce those assessments and generate that data. We are not the determiner of how this should be measured for educator effectiveness. There is also the Innovative Assessment Pilot, which of course was granted by the U.S. Department of Education in June of this year, and it gave the department the authority to engage in a 5-year pilot plan for developing an innovative assessment. And part of the General Assembly legislation this summer was to require an annual report, again, to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee annually in November, beginning in 2020. And this lines up very well with the report requirement from the U.S. Department of Education, which will be reporting to them annually every year in August. Just a brief update of where we are on that. I will say we hit the ground running. We were very eager to get started. Sometimes you move too fast to realize you need to slow down. And that is what we have done, and taking a step back and making sure that we have adequate input from our stakeholders. We've already had some meetings with regional groups of superintendents, regional group of curriculum leaders. We also have held a meeting of the volunteers that we have to date. And we have a fairly good-sized group of volunteers that have elected to participate in the actual first-year administration, which is 2020-21. So we had a meeting with them on November 12th, whenever lots of information have gotten really, really good input. We have another group of testing and growth advisors. We met with them for a day, and they gave us input as well. And the biggest takeaway from that input is I think that the focus needs to continue to be to get that input. This isn't a one and done. This isn't an overnight development project. This is something that needs to be done very deliberately with engaging stakeholders and getting that input. And as we like to remind the state, we have those districts and charter schools that have volunteered to participate. But if this goes well, potentially this could be the assessment system for the entire state in 2023-24. And so we all need to be engaged in this process. We have some upcoming test specification meetings, which is where we bring teachers in and we say to them, what do you think we should be measuring on these assessments? We're going to ask them a few additional questions. For that meeting, one thing important to note is we are inviting, of course, the volunteers, so they have representation, but also we are securing representation from the non-volunteers as well. And just to give you an idea of some of the questions that we're kind of tossing around, it's things like, should we have constructive response? And we all know constructive response costs money. It's an item type, and it also takes time to score. Should the testing window be flexible, particularly the through grade part? Should it be flexible or should it be defined as it is now for NC check-ins? With English language arts, we're looking at the issue around text complexity. Should we do as we do now with NC check-ins and start at a lower text complexity as you move through the year, increase the rigor? And the last one I would mention, and having a lot of conversation around, is, of course, the pacing guide. And of course, just in a nutshell, I would say that we kind of shy back from the department of having a statewide pacing guide because curriculum is local. And they've always had oversight on the curriculum and how the standards are taught and the timing of that. I will share that we have input from both sides. We have some that absolutely, in fact, aren't participating in the pilot because of their hesitation around the potential for having to teach certain standards within a certain time frame. But we also have others that have said, you know, rip the Band-Aid off and do it. So that's the conversation we'll keep having, as well as all these other points with our stakeholders, making sure that we continue to do that, and I'm sure we'll be back in the future to have more in-depth conversations with the board, as your input is equally important. There is another requirement in that legislation, and that is for the third grade English Language Arts Assessment to look at it and to see if it could better meet the goals of Read to Achieve. And it specifically asks us to compare the EOG reading test to the Read to Achieve test. There is a Read to Achieve test that is administered to students who do not meet proficiency on the end of grade test at the end of the school year. That test was formatted a little bit different. It broke up the reading selection so that there were sections of the reading selection and then there were some items that followed it. So it wasn't a complete reading selection and then all the items as we typically have. And on this one, the report is due March 2020, and we actually are already in development, have moved to transition to that for some time now, because as you may recall, we're administering new English Language Arts reading tests this year. And so at the beginning of that development cycle, we went ahead and had this conversation, had an idea this was coming, but also thought this was a good effort to do anyway. So we're already in progress with that. And then we're back to the end. This is where I started, so I will stop here, and thank you very much.
Great, Dr. Howard, thank you. Questions first on the report on statewide and local test administration. It's a report that we'll, again, vote to accept tomorrow. Any questions about any of the data in there? And then I'd ask any questions about the update on the Innovative Assessments pilot. For our new members, a grant we have from the Federal Department of Education to test out this through course, or I'm not sure that's the right term.
Through grade.
Through grade, excuse me, through grade assessment. Mr. Duncan.
I have two questions, if permitted. The first one is the data we will get from this new testing regime. Is it comparable? Is there any comparable usages of that data from the testing regime we have been following up through this year?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the application to the U.S. Department of Education included a specification that we would ensure comparability between, from a data perspective, a statistical perspective, between the assessments that we have currently in place and the assessments that we are developing. Because next spring, and by next spring I mean spring of 2021, what will happen is some students will take the regular current end of grade test, and some students will take this pilot assessment, and that's for grade 4 mathematics and grade 7 English Language Arts reading. So we are not federally allowed to hold students to two different standards. All students have to be held to the same standard. So that means in 2021, those assessments in that pilot, if a school is participating in those assessments, they will be held to the same academic standard as the current assessments.
Follow
up? I was going to move on to my second question, but I guess I'm asking if I'd take a score from the previous test, then take a score from this new test approach. Am I looking at, do I have to have some interpretation to say what the scores mean?
So for 2021, the first year of the pilot, and during the pilot, of course, the scores are comparable. We will be putting all the scores into one report. So we will not be reporting, we may do some additional reporting around the pilot, but for the purpose of accountability, no one will be aware that some students were taking the pilot and some students were taking the current assessment. There is always that transition point that I think you may be thinking about, if I may, of where when we shift to new assessments and we break what we call the trend line. Depending on how this all rolls out when we get to 2023-24, once we get there, the decision will be whether or not to go to a new standard setting. Anytime we go to a new standard setting around the academic achievement levels, that's really what's breaking that trend line. That or the changing of the academic content standards. So,
My second question, thank you for clarifying that one, is with the changes both in terms of using the federal grant initiative for exploring a testing approach that we feel comfortable with, and the Tax Reduction Act legislation, how do we feel about where we are in terms of the depth of the data that we would have for EVOS purposes?
So for now, we have, of course, engaged in conversations with SAS around EVOS. And we also, as part of the application, reached out to SAS, and they actually provided a letter of support for this work. But of course, this is development work, and so we're always having to ask ourselves the question and engage with SAS around the question of, is this going to have an impact on EVOS? The conversations at this point in time is that no, it will not. What EVOS requires are prior test scores and then a current test score, and we'll be able to fulfill that. Now, the challenge and where a lot of folks would like for us to go, and we would like to go, quite frankly, is to be able to loop in EVOS in those through grade events. Now, that's a little bit more challenging because of the shorter length of those tests, but those are conversations that we're engaged in and having, but that's not something I can commit to at this time. But the standard of EVOS that we have now, we currently do not have any reason to believe we would not be able to deliver.
If I could ask one last follow-up, will there be a reduced number of teachers who will have, or educators who will have EVOS data available to with respect to their work?
No, there will not be. Not during the pilot, and not when we get to the end. Yes, because everyone will still have data for reading and math. And of course, science is not involved in this, but if it were, eventually it would be probably, but not now. So that there is not an impact on the number of teachers receiving their EVOS ratings because of participating in the pilot. And even as it went to full rollout, we would make sure that wouldn't happen as well.
Yeah, to be clear, these are full rollout questions. I mean, I realize
Okay.
we're in transition, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask the.
Oh, absolutely, for the full rollout. I mean, the expectation would be, if we got to a point where we could not fulfill EVOS, then we would come back to this board and other leadership entities and have that conversation, because we realize that is an expectation.
Thank you, Dr. Howard.
Thank you.
Members, we're going to keep moving on this. SLA 3 is going to be an action item tomorrow. Just a reminder, we're voting on the report, not on the innovative pilot, which we have as a grant and is in progress and will continue to receive updates. We're going to move to a discussion item, SLA 4, which is our K-12 Social Studies Standards Revision update. And before I turn it over to Ms. Lynch-Ebert, I just want to remind you, we're going to go next into a discussion about graduation standards and requirements, graduation requirements as they relate to social studies, a relatively hot topic if you check email, related to where the personal finance course plays in. So that's going to come in the second item. We're first going to look at this broader overview of the K-12 standards revision. You'll remember we approved moving into this process. This is our update. Christy, you'll come back, Ms. Lynch, you'll come back in the spring, summer to seek approval to move into installation of the standards.
Yes.
Okay, so just a reminder of where we are.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that introduction. We'll try to set up this policy item for you well as we provide this overview. I am Christy Lynch-Ebert, Director of K-12 Standards Curriculum and Instruction. I'm joined today by Dr. Lori Major-Carlin, who's our Section Chief for Social Studies and Arts Education, as well as her team. And I'd like to acknowledge those members, if they're here, to please stand. Mr. Tom Dougherty, Justin Knox, Michelle McLaughlin, and Felicia Sanders, who have been facilitating this work, as well as our core working group for the EPF course, which includes Trey Michael and his team from Career Technical Education, as well as Liz Colbert and her team from the North Carolina Virtual Public School, as well as Sneha Shah Coltrane, who's working with us on the grad policy requirements, and others who have contributed to this work. So this is very cross-divisional and collaborative, in addition to being stakeholder informed. In April 2019, you all approved us moving forward with the revision of the K-12 standards for social studies. and to proceed with the review and revision process. On July 8th, 2019, House Bill 924 passed. That's the EPF, the Required Economics and Personal Finance course, but that also includes a course for civic literacy as part of the legislation. It also has professional development requirements and for teachers. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide you all with an update on the standards revision process for K-12 social studies, including implications for policy and alignment with the legislative requirements. Using implementation science, we are in the exploration phase of the standards development process. We expect these standards to be approved, as you mentioned, spring, summer 2020, and installation of the new standards in the 2021 school year, along with implementation of the required EPF course, beginning with incoming freshmen in 2020-21. During installation, we develop support materials, including crosswalks, unpacking documents, glossaries. We will provide other supports and training to teachers and educators to make sure that they understand and are prepared for full implementation, including how they will develop their local curriculum and providing training and other activities that are part of our state implementation plan. So implementation of all the K-12 standards will be in the 21-22 school year. We use implementation science to guide all of our activities. Implementation is defined as a specified set of activities designed to put into practice an activity or program of known dimensions. So these 4 buckets, if you will, are what drive our work around standards review, revision, and implementation. We're going to focus today on communication and visibility, as well as research and evaluation to inform recommendations for the K-12 social studies standards. North Carolina stakeholders are critical and an integral part of the revision process. We have been gathering input to the standards formally and informally since implementation of the current standards, which took place during the 2012-2013 school year. So this is an ongoing process. Teams of writers and reviewers have been working with the current standards. We've been looking at feedback from stakeholders, research from other states, from professional organizations, and analyzing educational trends to inform the revision of the new standards. A couple of considerations. With our internal procedures, any North Carolina content area standards that are developed use the revised Bloom's taxonomy framework. And this uses cognitive processes leading to specific learning outcomes, and it uses clear language that can be easily understood by a variety of audiences, such as parents, teachers, school board members, legislators, students, everybody, others. The standards review, revision, and implementation policy approved by the board in March 2018 incorporates the 4 guiding principles of being feedback-based, research-informed, improvement-oriented, and process-driven. These next few slides are going to walk you through a series of key events that have taken place through this process. So this illustrates some of the ways that research and evaluation are used during this stage in exploration, which we remain in until the standards are approved. We've used surveys, focus groups, and a data review committee to inform all aspects of standards review and to inform recommendations for the standards development. Key activities include ongoing implementation of the current standards, assessing readiness from stakeholders, analysis of data to inform recommendations, communicating through all formats, listservs, webinars, social media, advisory groups, et cetera, and developing surveys. Through the summer of 2019, and you can see all the specifics here, key activities include looking at research from other states, continued communications, such as a proposed scope and sequence webinar. Many of these are linked in your materials if you want to look at them. Continued updates in listservs, social media, other forms of communication. An application for writers and reviewers was launched to participate in the process. 37 writers and 42 reviewers were selected, representing all 8 of the state board districts. In July, as I mentioned, House Bill 924 was signed into law, which has also informed this process. And an EPF steering committee was established, and K-12 social studies writing teams were convened. DPI has convened a core working group to facilitate the development of the standards and objectives for the EPF course, with aligned options for instructional resources and materials as required by law. As we continue into the fall, working in collaboration with Dr. Mary Hemphill with the computer science revisions, we had a convening of the writing teams for both of those content areas K-12 in September in Raleigh. From September through the beginning of November, writing teams began the revision process for each grade level and course throughout K-12 social studies. The EPF working group created an overlay of existing content and standards with the standards and minimum instructional requirements identified or required in the legislation, along with identification of any gaps. So this content has been vetted through an internal steering committee made up of experts across all of those areas I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and we have also convened a stakeholder advisory group prior to public dissemination. We've provided communications such as an EPF brief, which you should have received, policy webinars to elicit stakeholder input, and other forms of communication. From November 6th until next week, December 11th, review teams have been providing feedback to the writing teams on first drafts, and writing teams are producing the first draft of revised standards for wide-scale public review. As Mr. Buxton mentioned, Ms. Sneha Shah-Coltrane will share with you during the next item new legislation requirements that will necessarily cause us to revise our graduation policy. The recommendations for this process will be brought for you. We've consulted with internal and external experts and stakeholders to offer what we hope is the best possible solution for North Carolina students and schools. A stakeholder survey was launched in November, and one of the pieces of the legislation speaks to sequencing of courses, and we have heard from our stakeholders that 80% of them would like for the high school sequencing to be recommended by the state board but not required. They need flexibility to adjust to their individual student needs, scheduling considerations, allocations of teachers, etc. For the EPF course, a stakeholder advisory committee comprised of content experts, higher ed members, business representatives, representatives of the North Carolina Council for Economics Education, which is named in the legislation, the Governor's Financial Literacy Council, and others identified by the General Assembly or DPI leadership, met on December 3rd to vet the course content and make recommendations prior to the wide-scale public review. So we know that stakeholders and you all are anxious to see the new social studies standards. These are going to be available hopefully by the end of next week. That's our goal, is mid-December through mid-January, 30-day period of wide-scale public review. We will notify you all, make sure you know when this is launched, and we encourage you to participate and also to share with others who would like to provide feedback and make sure that these standards are the very best possible they can be for our North Carolina students. So in closing, and I know I went through that very quickly, but I know we're running short on time. We've provided an update on the standards. We propose bringing these back to you in February, actually, for the EPF course, and later in the spring for the remainder of the K-12 standards, so that we can seek your approval to begin the installation process. We will now answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch-Ebert and Dr. Carlin. Questions on everything but high school courses? On the K-12 social studies division.
Yep.
Mr. Bristol-Smith.
Not about the high school courses, okay? So this is a question about process, and I want to ask you for two conflicting considerations.
Okay.
The first being that 30-day window of standards review by the public. I know that my own history teachers are very interested in that process, but if that begins at the end of next week and it runs for 30 days through mid-January, from the high school's perspective, we are running right up into exams. We have the winter holiday and then the start of spring semester. And as an administrator, what I want my folks to be doing is focusing on conditions on the ground. So one of my requests might be some consideration for possibly some mechanism to extend the public review period beyond the end of my fall semester, my winter holiday, and my spring start of spring semester, just because we're very focused on ending, resting, and starting again. Second conflicting request is that the timeline for installation in summer of 2020, would this be the rollout of new history standards for, explain to me the difference between installation and implementation so that I can understand
Yes.
that. And would this mean that we would need to have courses ready in August of 2020 to roll? Okay, so
With the exception, now this, Sneha Coltrane will get into this some with her discussion. He squeezed in that high school, but.
timeline.
The legislation for the EPF requires, right now, what the legislation says is required for incoming freshmen in the 2021 school year for them to take before they graduate from high school.
Got you, okay.
And you'll see in the next item some various scenarios for how that might play out. So the standards will be ready when they get approved by the board, hopefully by the end of this school year. Schools will not be required to implement until the 21-22 school year. So except for that EPF course. During the 2021 school year, that is when we work on unpacking documents, crosswalks, making sure that educators understand the content itself, that they have PD. We usually do regional PD, we do virtual PD. We involve stakeholders throughout that process as well, so that when the standards are required, the foundation's there for understanding.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't trying to cheat, Mr. Buxton.
And in regards to the timeline, the timeline is flexible. We have a timeline, but it really depends on this process of getting stakeholder feedback of what you all direct us to do. If we need to adjust the timeline, we can adjust the timeline. So that's good feedback as well.
So I think we would, without objection, respectfully request that you consider Mr. Bristow-Smith's suggestion about the timeline, given the nature of the calendar, to make sure high school teachers especially have a good opportunity to weigh in on the curriculum. So we don't need to answer that right now, but if you would take a look at that and let us know. Great. Thank you. Any other questions about K-12 social studies revision? Great. Again, this is not coming back for action next month. It's discussion this month, but we'll come back in the spring, summer to approve, to move forward. Thank you. Mr. Smith. All right. Now, we will get a little deeper into the high school issues, SLA 5. Similarly, this is a discussion issue, but we're not coming back next month for action specifically. So this is a discussion item that we're going to discuss, that we're not coming back next month in our normal 1-2 necessarily, this discussion. So we're going to talk about this. I want you to surface issues and questions, okay, and we'll see where we are around this issue.
And my goal is, our goal is that we discuss this month, and next month, even before the standards, we go ahead and get this into place, because the infamous master schedules of high schools need to begin as soon as possible. So we're kind of doing this not necessarily in the best way, but the best possible way.
Great.
Okay?
Please.
So, I have a handout. You have it in your, everybody should have it on e-board. It's actually, oh, I brought the wrong. It's actually just a document that's Carolina Blue. Grad 004. I realized it was better to give you a document instead of parsing it out into a PowerPoint. So if you don't mind, just know that you have that information. So we have been, you had a picture of the war room is what we were calling it, and Eric has seen it. We have about 15 pieces of paper up there, because to make this legislation happen, it is incredibly complicated. What we've tried to do is actually combine, I can't do this at the same time, triangulate legislation, your board policy, and the process we're doing with the standard course of study revision, and LEA needs, because all three of those have to integrate. And we do not want to give any extra burdens on our schools and teachers if we don't have to. So in thinking about all of that, the factors that we really need to consider, I'll get it. Okay. In case, it should be in, it was in the folder. It's not. Yeah, it's on e-board. They're following you. Okay. So we have to think about the current graduation requirements. The current graduation requirements for students that are in school now. So you have a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, a senior, and a fifth-year senior thinking, right? So you have 5 years to think about the current graduation requirements, of which students are already in progress, of which we don't want to limit, right? So we have those 5. Then, starting next year, we have to have EPF into place. But then in the following year, in 21, 22, you have the new Founding Principles course along with the other social studies courses that'll come into play. So then you have another 5 years worth of children, okay? So we had to kind of think through all of this alongside of the idea that when we looked at this, and you can look at the colored visual we have here for you, that's up on the chart paper upstairs, you can, oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. But if you look at the color-coded chart, what you'll see is if we make no changes to the current graduation requirements for these cohorts of students, you end up with potentially in 2021, 5 courses needing to be taught, and then in 2022, potentially 7 courses that have to be taught by a high school at the same time for all the different cohorts of kids, okay? Now, I've not been a high school master scheduler. I was an elementary school master scheduler, and we went to color days that year because we had way too many kids, not enough specialists. But needless to say, I can't imagine, right, how to integrate 10 cohorts of students into 2 graduation requirements. So as a result, we got lots of feedback from school districts, from teachers, internally. We just really hunkered down over the last several months, and we have the best possible scenario for you presented. Because we don't want a school to have to necessarily teach 7 courses at the same time. And if they want to, just go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid and go for the 4 already next year. If they feel like, a principal feels like he or she has the qualified personnel that doesn't need all the PD, they could do that. Or, no, I have a newer staff, I need some courses that are new, some courses that are old. So what we have for you on the document on the last page is really what we're proposing to you, is our best thinking, is that for the incoming students, pretty straightforward. You have 4 courses: World History, American History, the new Founding Principles course, which is legislated, Founding Principles of the United States of America and North Carolina Civic Literacy. We will have to truncate that in Power School, but it'll be in policy. And then the Economics and Personal Finance course, okay? We have those 4. Then what we're proposing is for current students. So like my daughter's in school right now as a sophomore, okay? Her graduation requirements actually shifting to ORS. So depending on what Tabari wants to do in his school, right? Depending on what Matt wants to do in his school, they figure out and they understand their students, they understand where they are, how they've managed it, their teaching staff, etc. You then have ORS. So a student could graduate with world history, but any combination thereof of the American history courses. Either the 2 that were already there, if they've already taken them. Asha hasn't taken American history yet. She's in AP Gov right now. Well, next year, if her school decides, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and do the new American history course, then that would be fine with an additional credit of another course. Or no, that school is big enough, Jordan can handle it. I don't know what they're doing, by the way. Example, then they're going to keep all 7 courses going. But we are giving options, which is most critical for our folks doing the hardest work, those in the schools. And then one of the courses of the Founding Principles. So that way, no matter which one you're doing. Now, does that mean there may be a subgroup of a subgroup of a subgroup of kids who may not exactly graduate with the exact same courses? Yes. But we don't know how else to fix this, and this is the best move forward to allow schools to do what they need to do with the good intent of the legislation to be on the forefront. Dr. Segal just sent us something from Nebraska about economic finance. We're on the forefront. It's amazing what we're doing with this course. I think y'all are going to be so pleased with it. So we want to stay true to the intent, but the implementation gets really sticky. And so this is our best thinking. School districts, once we're able to explain this to them, feel a lot better about it. You've gotten some emails that we've responded to, and as soon as we can get them on the phone and say, oh, we're going to give ORs to you, got it. Because ORs, right, equal opportunities, and allow people to do what they need to do. The other concern that we have heard, especially recently, is the notion of the American history shifting. Yes, that is shifting. Change is hard. Years ago, we used to only have one American history course, then we went into two, and now we're going to one. So it's a matter of ensuring that our teachers have the resources they need, helping them think about electives if there's content they would like to go further into, really focusing on other courses like the Founding Principles one, where some of the other information can also live. So that is our best thinking. We would love your feedback and any other ideas to help make this work for our students in high schools across the state.
Thank you, Ms. Coltrane. Let me get questions. Please, Ms. Kamenetz.
I think that what you said in the beginning is completely right. It may not be the best possible scenario, but it's the best possible scenario. I can't imagine how else you would deal with the problem.
Mr. Chairman?
Would we want students taking American History 1 or 2? In other words, only one, as opposed to they either take both of the 1 and 2, or they take the new American History course?
So it's not a matter of want, it's a matter of what is feasible. So you have students who may have taken, for whatever reason, not many of them, but maybe they already were in American History too. Okay, for whatever reason, their schedule didn't work. They didn't move here until the spring semester. The high school was on a block schedule, and American History 2 was the only one they had. But then next year, that school may not be necessarily offering American History 1. So it would be a matter of decision, okay, are you going to take the full American History, or is there another history course that you could take, like if they've taken AP Gov, you're like, and the principal and that teacher knows AP Gov covered a lot of X. We feel good with that. We're letting the districts decide, give them that option to say, hey, another credit in that area, but not necessarily locked down. But that's also changeable.
Mr. Ford, while Chairman ponders the response.
Go ahead. So I will confess that I come from one of those states where you have 1 year long American history course. So I'm not averse to the idea of teaching something in a comprehensive manner and doing it well. I do think it will represent a transition. And I'm gonna pontificate here a little bit. I'm gonna go off the course and say the concern I have is frankly that the questions I have cannot be answered by anybody in this room, right? So we didn't create the situation, but I'm concerned because the current structure that we have as a history teacher, I feel puts us in a potential situation where we can by taking bits and pieces, create a legacy of historical ignorance at a moment when we least need it nationally in our discourse. And I'm just gonna be transparent about that. It almost looks like a design for that, right? And I mean, I would love to talk about financial literacy, grounded in some macroeconomics of racial wealth gaps and all that, but I know that that's off the table. So a lot of this feels very problematic to me, especially one who envisions education as the process of making one more civic ready and more well-rounded and more global-centric. this feels like it will, it feels like an a la carte arrangement when it comes to history. And I just, as we think about creating global ready citizens, it really frightens me. Now, that being said, I'll step off my soapbox for a second and say that assuming that this new American history course does an excellent job of capturing comprehensively our our evolution from, prior to the formation of our republic to our present day, then great. I think that's great. One that is centered on multiple perspectives, not just traditional, white Protestant male perspectives, but incorporates the legacy of African American and Native perspective. Great. If we can pull that off, wonderful. I'm not certain that that's what's being offered, though, and that's where a lot of my concern comes from with regard to this.
One additional piece I want to make sure get in the minutes that I did not say. The legislation also states we can only have 4 social studies graduation requirements. So I realize I skipped over that piece that's in the paper, but I think that we are limited to 4, of which now 2 are legislated. That leaves us 2 credits that we're able to do.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Wallace?
When you say 2, that means the freshmen coming in next year will have to have the legislated 2.
Yes.
Even with all the ors you said we could do.
Well,
locally,
the incoming
the 2
freshmen,
has
correct, the incoming freshmen don't have the ORs. The current cohort of kids have the ORs. The incoming freshmen would have what's up right now on the screen at the top section: World, American, the new American history, the founding principles of the United States of America and North Carolina civic literacy, and economics and personal finance. The reason why, so economics and personal finance, the legislation did say it's the incoming graduating class, right? So technically there's 4 years to do that.
Right.
However, with all the other changes happening, that's the course you may have to go and implement first, right? Or maybe World, because that may be the one with some of the least changes.
Right.
So it's gonna take some creative working, because we're dealing with, again, the triangulation of 3 different timelines. 2 legislated different timelines on different courses. The board and what we are in the DPI process for the social studies revision, and then what's already happening in schools.
All right, now for teachers. Ma'am?
Oh, please.
Okay, for teacher preparation, we're having to condense American history 1 and 2. Has there been a crosswalk done or conducted that will tell the teachers what objectives/standards are no longer required to be taught or will not be assessed at the end, or are the LEA or the teachers gonna have to figure that out?
No, it will be a part of the new standards that are that are coming up for review in the next couple days. Teachers will have an opportunity to see those things, and we feel the pain that you've expressed. But we are trying to work within the legislation and work within the policy. One thing that makes me feel a little bit better is the knowledge that in 2nd, 5th, and 8th grade, there is a focus on American history for our students. And so these new standards, and 8th grade especially, yeah. So these students are getting it as we go along, and then you will see in the new standards that are being proposed, or in the revised standards that are being proposed, we do have strands of the history, and we have strands of economics in all of them. So we hope that our teachers will be able to see those things reflected.
The other piece is that has been helpful, is that there's no more final exams. So if there had been a final exam, I don't know how. Honestly, I don't even want to think of. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm which I don't get speechless. So the positive aspect of that piece that you said, of which pieces won't be assessed and which will be,
Right.
from the state, that's no longer a factor.
A factor.
So that way, it rests locally, right, in your school, with your team to discuss how are you going to make this work.
All right, I'm going to take the prerogative of the last question here based on the chairman's, or I'll get you in because you're the vice chairman.
That's not the reason.
I've got 3 questions.
Come on.
Number one, what does the curriculum look like for a year-long course in economics and personal finance? Number 2 is, what does the curriculum look like for a year-long course in founding principles of the United States of America and North Carolina, civic literacy? And number 3, what are the things being left out of the American history course as you combine it from a 1-year course to a 2-year course that would no longer be part of any standards assessment? And feel free to be as specific as you can be on number 3.
Wow, okay. I think that the answers to those questions will be revealed when we send those standards out for the revision, the public review process. But what we've done with the writing teams is we've used research from other states, we've used research from our own teachers and from parents and students about the things that they think are working within our standards and the things that maybe haven't been working or needed to be updated. And so the writing and review teams have used that data to construct some new standards. Now, not all of the standards have been let go. We will be including some. I can't speak specifically to which ones are gone and which ones will be in there, but everyone will have the opportunity to see everything specifically. We're hoping next Friday.
Well, we don't meet again until next month. And it'd be important to me to see those things before we vote on it. I'm willing to wait till next month.
I want to ask a last question here real quick.
The voting won't be next month.
Yeah,
Mr. Duncan, it'll be a while.
it'll be a while, okay.
So you'll have plenty of time.
Will you be back next month to talk about to perhaps answer those questions at that time?
If you'd like.
I guess it'll depend on the review process, and if we lengthen it out a little bit, the time that they come back based on feedback from the field. So let's do this, because I think we clearly have interest, the board, to see some more of these standards. So let's talk about what we can do next month or what we might do in February, and make sure we put the information on the table that people are looking for. My last question is, could we cross-list EPF as a career and technical education course and allow it to count as a high school graduation requirement under that? And it could be either, and so a high school could choose, or a student could choose to use that to satisfy a CTE requirement for graduation and take American History 1, American History 2.
We have no graduation requirements for CTE, period. So CTE comes into electives, just like arts and world language. Also, and any teacher can teach this course based on the legislation if they go through the PD that is outlined. So a CTE teacher could teach the course, a social studies teacher, a really passionate math teacher can teach it. Whomever the principal decides is the best fit in their school and go through the training, they would decide that. If a student, so there are no graduation requirements. The other piece is that CTE, and Trey, is Trey still here? I'm gonna try. This is being asked a lot, is that with the new Perkins 5, it has to do with a sequence of courses. That finance course is no longer just a one-off. And so this is one course for the entire population of our students, almost 6 million students, right, in 12 years would experience this course, whereas a CTE course is an elective as part of a pathway. Also, this course, the standards, how we have seen it, it encompasses both the CTE that's currently offered in that financial course and the economics from the civics course, about 50-50. So no one it's not matching to either side of the conversation right now, that this really is a whole new course on EPF.
CTE teachers are federally paid, so
They can't be touched.
You
can't ask them to do
teaches
that.
the course, I apologize.
Yeah.
If a CTE teacher teaches the course, they can't be paid from federal funds.
See?
So we have these same questions. These are valid questions. And we've banged our head against the wall on each of these already. Having 2 required for us, nobody sees a need to pull anything out. We understand that. But
we can't add an extra graduation requirement. CTE isn't a requirement already, so we've
Right,
we've
that's right,
followed these
that's right.
same things.
Okay, I was thinking about an old policy. Let me make sure, I think I saw, I want to give our board advisors one more shot on this. Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
this
that-
isn't,
That was my same question about, had there been any discussion with CTE, because there is an accounting and a finance course currently served under the CTE umbrella, and I didn't know what objectives overlap. So it wouldn't be any redundancy with the students that haven't adhered twice.
so as a reminder, we're not coming back to vote on this next month. These are both discussion items, not under our traditional discussion and then action, for you to weigh in. That's it. Go ahead. Laura.
The plan was for this to get voted on next month. Is that what you said?
No, that's not what I said, because that's not what I understood.
The plan was if we could get this voted on in January, after another 30 days out, so that way we can go ahead and get LEAs informed and they can start planning their schedules and course codes and power school.
Got it. Okay. I stand corrected. My mistake. And I think,
no,
no. I think now that I remember this.
But the standards.
Right,
will
the
be
standards. Okay. So
No, it's backwards.
I think that means it becomes pretty important, to Mr. Duncan's question, to get some information in January when we come back on this about what's included in some of these standards, so people have a comfort level with what we're asking teachers to do, especially in the context of a year-long course, what's gonna get squeezed out, and what's in these other courses. Did I capture that?
Yes,
Enough?
well.
So we'll have that as a part of January, and we will come back and vote on that. Okay.
We could also send the board in a Friday updates between now and then, what the key changes are. Not just the public review, where we can kind of outline, here's what's changed, so that, just for your reference.
I think that would be warranted. Thank you, Dr. Scott. Doctor. Okay. Last item is just an update, and especially, frankly, for our new board members, K-3 reading, which we do every month. A couple things. I want to make sure new board members, Dr. Hall and Dr. Tipton Rogers especially, understand that last year in January and February, we had a series of presentations and discussions on K-3 reading in the wake of another year of pretty disappointing scores in early literacy. After reviewing testimony essentially and recommendations, we adopted a framework for action that's on eBoard about what we thought our priorities needed to be to address the issue. We also adopted a timeline with the department to take action so we would have a sense of accountability, have a sense of urgency, and have a sense of transparency for this one. We were intended to have this month an update on the definition of high-quality instruction, which was going to then help inform the pre-K through 12 literacy instruction and educator preparation task force to make sure we were focused on what we needed them to do in service of our teacher graduates. We are going to look at that next month. You have it in eBoard, but that came to you last night. We talked, Dr. Stegall and I did, we'll go ahead and do that as a discussion item in January. That's going to be an important item because it really sets up a lot of the other work. We also are now putting some resources through the budget. The last update I want to give you is that there was an update that was supposed to come in October that we did not receive, that I think we figured out last night in a meeting on the Read to Achieve budget, that there's a $2.8 million item in the Read to Achieve budget for science of reading training as a kind of pilot for something that could scale statewide. Dr. Stegall and Dr. Emery have committed to relook at that because that contract has not been fully finished, I think, yet, to look at whether there is some crossover with our lower performing districts and schools, especially in K-3 reading, that we could repurpose or purpose those dollars towards. In addition, in our discussion last night, we learned that there is something between 1.3 and, these are my calculations, 3.3, probably 1.3 to 3 million unexpended for this year with Read to Achieve dollars that we're going to ask the department to come back in January and look at options, especially related to low performing and turnaround, where we could use those dollars this year to allocate to support teachers and students who need them the most. So that's the update for this month. Look forward to getting that discussion and those recommendations in January, consistent with our framework for action on this item. Chairman, that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. My thanks to board members, advisors, DPI staff, and other presenters for participating in today's meeting. I ask for a motion to go into closed session, and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, the December 4th, 2019 meeting will adjourn immediately. Vice Chair Duncan?
Move that the State Board of Education go into closed session to consult with our attorneys to discuss personnel matters, other attorney-client privilege matters, including Amplify Education, Inc. versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, Hope County versus State of North Carolina and North Carolina State Board of Education, and Mount Airy School Board of Education versus North Carolina Department of Public Instruction.
Motion by Mr. Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Keenan. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Ms. Kimmett?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers? Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes?
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Okay, let's try to get into closed as quick as we can so we can try to get out as quick as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Eric, you got a lot of changes with the Panthers I've been reading about.
Not surprising after losing to 3 teams.
You gotta do something.
Well,
Something ain't working.
when he's